Pull that shit up, Jamie.
All right. Who started last time, me or you?
I think you did.
Go ahead.
All right. Hold on. I'm a little nervous. Just
Just the tip.
Just the tip.
Just a tip.
Catches it. All right. Welcome to The Way It Should Be. I'm Dean.
I'm JD.
And we've got Connor back with us. And
Howdy.
we're going to have a nice conversation about religion.
Copy.
Because we started to have this conversation on the last podcast, but we didn't record it. And I thought it was interesting because, as I've said before, I was a Jehovah's Witness. And you were?
Recovering Mormon.
Was
Mormon. Now recovering.
And we both left our respective churches. And I did it a long time ago, and you're pretty fresh out, right?
Yeah. Almost exactly a year.
Almost a
at
year.
this point.
Okay.
Coincide with the birth of my most recent child. I don't know. If you ask me, it's my last child. My wife wants one more. So,
Oh, okay. Go get that snip, bro.
so every time we celebrate her birthday, it's like she gets a nice reminder now.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay. Well, yeah, it's a weird transition when you leave that kind of world, isn't it?
yeah, I mean night and day.
Yeah.
Because, and I mean, we're come out strong, I guess, but it's Jehovah's Witness and LDS or Mormon would classify as a cult.
Yeah.
So coming,
I have a hard time myself personally. I don't like saying that because I don't know. There's something about me that doesn't want to admit that I was in a cult, but really it was.
and for me, it's like, I don't mind saying it because I'm out. So it's like, hey, dude, the veil's been lifted or whatever, but more as an insult to family members and friends that are still in. That's my hesitancy with saying cult.
Yeah.
So you family, like you grew up in more. You say Mormonism? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you grew up in it. Family's been in it for a long time, or
They call
recent?
it being born under the covenant. So yeah, my parents were married in the temple, and all the children that are born when my parents are like still active in the faith are considered born under the covenant. So yeah, from as far back as I can remember, Mormon
Okay.
or LDS. The newest prophet has gone away from the term Mormon. He doesn't like it. So he's like, we shouldn't refer to ourselves as Mormon, even though the last prophet and the one before did this like $1 billion ad campaign for years, like the I am a Mormon. And they have anybody famous, any actor, actress, athlete, do these little, 30-second clips of like, I'm a professional athlete and I'm a Mormon.
So what do they prefer? LDS?
LDS now, but that's just
LDS.
because the prophet said to.
That-
It was
okay.
Mormon
And
forever.
his word is pretty much that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
okay.
when you say the last prophet, just I'm not versed. I thought I was decently versed in possible more LDS.
You just say Mormon.
You don't need to be
Mormonism?
politically correct when it comes to
And
a cult.
Mormonism's fine too.
Well, I'm okay. So if you don't mind, explain that. Is that like? Are we gonna say like that's the Pope is to Catholicism?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe even a stronger head there because I feel like, well, I don't know enough about Catholicism to say that, but I would even say more so. Because so the Mormon church they call it the first presidency. So there's the prophet, first counselor, second counselor. So that's 3. And then they also have 12 apostles. Now, when the prophet's in until he dies, basically, so they've had a couple over the last century that have had like dementia. And they kind of just prop him up. It's like a Joe Biden situation. Like, hey, we'll just, when he's feeling good, we'll roll his ass out there with he'll cut the ribbons and bless the babies or whatever. They don't bless babies, but, they don't baptize babies. They bless babies. But they stay in until they die, essentially. And then it's the oldest, whoever's been the apostle the longest at that point in time becomes the prophet.
Oh, okay.
So are we like actual? Is it looked at as like actual prophet? Like
Moses, Noah.
yes.
Oh, so he's
yeah.
actually hearing the word of God and transmitting
allegedly.
it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just going off of the
Yeah.
fiction they
So
have.
what?
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I did not realize that. What kicked this off for you? What?
So, and I don't know with like Jehovah's Witnesses if they have like the layers of history, and I'm saying that in quotations. Y'all can't see me.
Oh, yeah, we got a history, bro.
So, okay. And I'm actually curious because I don't know a ton about Jehovah's Witnesses other than like when I was a missionary, like the white shirt and tie missionary,
Yeah,
we'd talk shit about y'all's missionaries because you guys do it on the weekends, but we do it for 2 years full time.
full time, but okay.
We pay to go.
Let
We'll talk
me
about
let
it.
me tell you.
Okay, tell me.
It wasn't just on the weekends. That's shit's for life, every day of your life.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
we would, and same with kind of Mormonism. Like you're supposed to always be a missionary. It's not really true because I live in Utah and everybody's a Mormon or former.
Oh, let me
Mormon,
tell you
but-
something, bro. There's a quota system for people. We call them publishers. This is what you're known as.
Okay.
You're known as when you get baptized, you're called a publisher. And you normally they go out on the weekends just because that's when you normally have time off.
Yeah.
But there's a quota. It's not a hard and fast quota, but they like to see. You have to report every time you go out in service. You got to report how many hours you went out. You got to report how many magazines you gave out. You got to report any books you gave out.
Serious?
Yeah,
Okay.
you got to report any Bible studies you might have had. You got to report all that. All that goes back to the secretary at the Kingdom Hall.
Okay.
And if your hours dip below a certain amount, the
month or
per month
okay.
per month, the secretary will, if it's a pattern, he'll come up to you and be like, "Hey, brother, so and so, I've noticed you haven't been putting a lot of hours in lately in the ministry. Is there anything going on? Is there anything we can do?" They want you to hit about 8 hours, so
month.
2 hours every weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, for a publisher. Then you have pioneers, and they're full time. They do it all day, every day.
Are they paid?
No,
Or are they wealthy so they can afford to do that?
they're usually retarees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There are some that are paid, but we'll get into that.
So yeah, so back to the what kind of sparked the I'm gonna leave the I can't imagine how hard that must have been.
Have you seen the new like Banner of Heaven show? Andrew Garfield was in it.
No, I don't guess so.
So when you start questioning it, and it's like there's a moment where you finally like you realize it's not true. Basically, like so you've wasted in a sense your entire life, like the friendships you've given up, like opportunities, all the things that you could have done or didn't or would have done differently that dictated, teams you couldn't play on because games were on Sunday or practices were on Sunday, like anything like that. But they call it like the long night of the soul or the dark night of the soul.
Oh,
And
really?
it can last like months. That's what they refer to it as, like where you finally realize it's not true. And it's like that deep depression, like cyclical thinking where it's like, man, I've wasted my life. And because like, as far as Mormonism is concerned, if you leave the faith, like you're basically like you'd be better off dead. Like the worst two things you can do is like take an innocent life and deny the Holy Ghost or like deny the faith.
Yeah, same here.
So if you leave,
Yep.
like you'd just be better off killing
Do
yourself.
they? So witnesses, if you leave, there's two different ways you can be cast away. There's disassociation. That's where you say, "Fuck it, I'm walking away. I'm not going to do this anymore."
Okay.
They have the same effect. And then there's disfellowship. That's if you got caught doing something wrong. You go through a formal like trial process, in front of the elders, and they make the determination you got to go, bro. I mean, you can still come to the meetings and all, but nobody can talk to you because you're a sinner. And you're going to infect everybody else with your sins. So do they...
Polluting.
Yes, polluting, yeah. So if you're disassociated, which I think I technically am, because I just kind of told them to go fuck off. And then there's disfellowship. So
disassociation, is that what you said?
Yeah,
The first term?
yeah.
That's you making the choice.
that's you making the
And
choice.
the
But
other
it
one
has the
is them
same
kicking
same
you out.
penalty.
Okay.
And once you do that, friends, the whole life you had before is all gone because nobody's ever going to talk to you again.
And that's interesting. So Mormonism, like that's more of a cultural aspect. Like that's not like officially embraced to do that.
really?
But you get blackballed. Like, so I have friends and stuff that leave the church and like their moms and dads won't talk to them anymore. Or like their siblings just blackball them. Like they won't talk to like their nieces and nephews because like their dad left the church or whatever
Really?
it is.
So it's not like an official proclamation from the church that says you can't talk to this guy anymore.
No. And at this point, because the church is losing members so dramatically, like it's like a mass exodus at this point from the LDS church because of and it's the history, which I want to get into a little bit, but the actual history of the church, I started getting into that, and that's what pushed me out. So the church is very much whitewashed their own history, and then they tell members like, hey, anything that you read about like Joseph Smith, who was the founding prophet, or any current leaders that's negative, like that's anti-Mormon, that's of the devil, like you'll feel the spirit leave, and like that's not of God. So if you hear anything negative, like Joseph Smith is like next to Jesus Christ in purity, which now they're trying to change that mentality because of the ease of the internet, essentially, like accessibility. But before they could do that, and they'd be like, oh no, well, if you hear that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, like that's a lie, dude. Like that's from Satan. That's not true at all. And in reality, like he had 37 wives. And I think of the first 7 he was married to, like sealed to, whatever term you want to use. 6 of them were already married to another person.
Whoa.
And like, they don't tell you that. Like,
Yeah.
they'll eventually, if you kind of back them into a corner, they'll be like, well, he practiced polygamy, but like, he never slept with any of those women. Like, Brigham Young slept with all of his, but I'm supposed to believe that Joseph Smith never slept with any of his other wives. And so to like find out, like I said, I think it's 6 of the first 7 were already married and like their spouses weren't dead.
Wow.
And then the church will be like, well, some of their husbands weren't members. And so like him being married to them just
Didn't
helped
count?
them come to God. And like, that wasn't true either.
Okay.
I think one of them, that was the
That's
case.
a cool workaround. They're not
So-
technically LDS, so, you know, I can
Yeah,
take
like,
that bitch. It's
yeah,
all
I
right.
could take her. So like learning a lot of that stuff, and blood doctrine was a big one for me, where Joseph Smith taught it a little bit, but Brigham Young like really brought that shit home, where there are certain sins that you can't be forgiven of on this life. And so it's like the saint's job to kill them so that God can judge them. So that's like blood atonement. And like realizing that prophets in quotations again, practice that on this life, and like the church just, oh, that's of Satan, bro. Like, that's not true. And it's like, no, that's like a documented thing. Like, members of the church, like apostles at the time, had that written in their journals. Like,
Wait, what do you
can't
mean saints killed them? Like members of the
physically
church would go kill them?
1800s, yeah.
Whoa. Like, what were some of the sins?
Dude, in some instances, like I heard of 1 or 2 cases where Brigham Young was like, the federal government was coming down on him in Utah, and
They put up a good fight.
they were like, hey, we're gonna get the hell out of here because we don't want to get killed here. We'll go to like California or wherever else. And then like they just found their bodies like a week later with their throats cut from like ear to ear.
Wow.
So it's like, oh, you were going to disobey. So it varied in severity what that sin was. It could be anything from like disobeying the prophet to adultery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the history is kind of what led you
Yeah.
to this position.
The actual history of the church would have been what led to it, not the whitewashed version that the church puts out.
Right. Okay.
Because if you ask them, they'll be like, everything happened in this perfect order. Like God appeared to Joseph Smith when he was 14. And then, a few years later, Peter, James, and John appeared and like gave him the Aaronic and then the Melchizedek priesthood. So like the actual priesthoods that Christ and the apostles used was like restored to the earth. So we can now act in his name. We're the only church that can act in God's name because we have his power essentially back on the earth. And like that everything happened in this perfect, beautiful timeline. And then you get into the actual history of the church, and like the original people that helped Joseph found the church got kicked out. And then once they were out, he went and like backdated Revelations, like physically added them into like the church's new publications. Like, oh no, it was on this day that we got the priesthood. And this dude's like, bro, I was there. That never happened. And he's like, well, he left the church, bro. He's apostate. He'll tell you anything. He's of Satan. You can't listen to him.
Wow. Throwing that apostate thing out will shut a lot of people up real quick.
Yeah.
Because that's one of like the only sins that you can't come back from is turning your back on God.
So with y'all, like with Jehovah's Witnesses, I imagine now that you left, they tell existing members, I'm sure, that like, oh, you don't listen to anything he says because he's of Satan now and you can't trust him. He's like the snake in the Garden of Eden. Bro.
That's exactly right. That's why they won't talk to you.
Yeah.
Because you've turned your back on God, and therefore your only goal now is, as far as they're concerned, is to turn other people away from the truth.
Yeah.
That's what we call it, the truth.
Because you have the spirit of the devil or the spirit of contention.
Yep.
Or whatever.
That's
I don't know what
exactly
terms they
right.
use.
It's pretty much
So
the same.
what was your moment of leaving?
Oh man, it was a long burn for me actually, because they were doing a talk. We called them talks, so not sermons or anything. So there was a I can't remember if it was during like the ministry school or something like that. Because we went 3 days a week to church or whatever. Yeah, it was all encompassing. It's 3 days a week. I think they're down to 2 now, but there's a verse in Acts, and I don't remember what chapter or verse it is, but I think it's Peter. He's out there preaching to somebody, and he's trying to convince them about Jesus and all this bullshit. And he's like, hey, man, don't take my word for it. Go and search out the scriptures and prove what I'm saying to yourself. Prove it to yourself that it's true. It's all right there in the books. And I sat there and I said, man, I'm a curious person. I want to do that too. So I started, like, man, I'd be sitting in my room. And I was probably, I don't know, man, 17 or 18 years old, still living at home. I had books like history books. I had different versions of the Bible. I'd have I had, you know what an interlinear version
You
of
guys allowed to use different versions of the Bible?
Yeah, they don't. Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah,
To me. Okay.
yeah. They have their own translation, but if I went to the door and someone's like, "I don't want to use yours," I'm like, "Well, go get yours. It's all the same shit." And it basically is just they wanted their own because they put Jehovah in there a bunch of times. Where I don't know, whatever. That's a different thing. But an interlinear version of the Bible is where you have the original Hebrew and Greek or Aramaic or whatever, and you'd have literal word for word translations. So I'm out there going, I'm going to really prove that this shit is right because I believe it's true, but I want to make sure it's true. Like I told you, I've always been somebody that questions my beliefs. So I sat down and I'm pouring through books. I'm pouring through other church documents from other churches. I'm reading all kinds of stuff. And then I was like, okay, this is interesting. Then I get into the history of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and
Just so explain that real fast because
I don't know
because a
the
lot of people
hierarchy of the church.
yeah. So the Watchtower essentially
Jehovah's Witnesses is the name of the religion, right? You're a Jehovah's Witness. You're witnessing for Jehovah, but the organization that runs it is called the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. That's what prints all the books, the magazines, runs the missionary programs, does everything for the Kingdom Halls, builds the Kingdom Halls, and all that stuff. That's the legal structure for the organization.
Like S Corp or whatever.
I just wanted because I don't know how common knowledge that is. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
So that's all that is. And I started reading about the history of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, Jehovah's Witnesses in general, and I started getting this weird feeling, man. I was like, man, this is weird, because like the thing that bothered me the most was there's you always hear they would always say stuff like God knows what's in your heart, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, I'm reading this stuff and it's making sense. I guess I could say this is true, but then I'm like, I was reading this other stuff from other Christian religions, and I'm like, well, they're saying basically the same thing with just a little bit of. There's really not that many doctrinal differences. There's some big ones, but there's not that many between Jehovah's Witnesses and regular Protestant churches. And I was like, but if they're good people, and only he can read what's in your heart, why would they get destroyed in Armageddon and we would survive? That doesn't make any sense.
Like a loving God wouldn't do that.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, this is a God I love. And, just because they haven't become a Jehovah's Witness doesn't mean they're going to get wiped out in Armageddon. That doesn't make any sense. And so then I started looking at, I was like, okay, well, there's other religions out there too. So let's look at those. So I started looking at Islam, and I read the Quran, and it's difficult. It's interesting, but I read the Quran. I looked at Buddhism and Shintoism. I had a trunk once that had probably had, or not a trunk, but I used to have like maybe 800 books that I read on all kinds of stuff. And so I was a big nerd, but yeah, it had to be something
very
like that.
Analytical approach, though.
Yeah, very, very analytical. And it was, and then so I started to realize after I looked at all these different religions, I said, okay, yeah, they're all a little bit different. But what the big thing is that I take from all of them is they're all basically telling you not to be a piece of shit. They're all saying the same thing. So I'm thinking, well, how can this be because we're taught as Jehovah's Witness that this is the only true religion. Mm-hmm. All the other ones are apostate religions. They're of the devil. They're,
Do you guys do like every religion has a piece of truth in it? Or is it just they're all basically wankers?
Yeah, it's all, there's maybe a little bit of truth in there, but it's not the actual truth.
It's not the whole truth.
Yes.
Okay.
Only we had the real truth.
That was Mormonism too.
Yeah.
Every religion has truth or good things. That's why, if you listen to them, it sounds good. But we have the whole picture.
Yes,
They have a piece of
exactly.
the pie, but we got the bakery, bitch.
Yeah. So if you want to guarantee yourself salvation, you got to come over to our side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's different from my I guess upbringing within the church.
Baptist
For the most part, some non-denominational, because basically they said, well, the Church of Christ doesn't play the piano in there, they do these slight differences, but all roads kind of lead to the same path, except for Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, and Catholics.
Yeah.
That was
yeah, that's funny. So we would exclude everybody. Like,
everybody's out, bro.
We're not going to
You
make
guys
the
were
judgment.
Crazy.
Huh?
You guys were crazy.
We were?
Jehovah's Witnesses are nuts, bro.
Oh, we
Y'all are
thought
a
you
cult.
guys were. You know what's funny about that is we would be like, those Mormons, they're different. They got their own Bible and everything. Like, you guys literally have your own book.
Yeah, the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. But we kind of respected you because you would out there be banging on doors just like us.
Yeah.
So we
And
kind of
was
had
the
that.
thing. It was definitely 100% respect. Like, hey, do those guys get out there and work, man?
Yeah.
Like, they want
These
truth.
other lazy fucks, they're not
dude.
Jesus told you to go out 2 by 2 and talk and preach the word. And they're sitting on their fucking fat asses drinking beer, not doing anything on the weekends. Look at us. We're so much better. Yeah, that's right.
Not like So to hear like even Baptists saying other not like hardcore Christian cult like us, but even to hear Baptists saying other churches are true or like they all lead to God, like that's wild to me, bro.
Yeah.
You got to call everybody else a liar. Like I don't. That
See,
doesn't make
I knew
sense.
that just because I looked into everything.
Yeah.
So that's what made me go on to other stuff.
Yeah, and not to say that there weren't some that said, no, this is the way, but not to a point where you'll be condemned. At least that's not the message that I ever received. And
Yeah,
I,
like if you went from the Baptist church to the Methodist church, you're not going to burn in hell forever.
Right. That was my like my grandmother was my great grandmother went to Church of Christ. So in the summer we would go to Vacation Bible School at the Baptist church that we went to, and then we would go to my grandmother's Church of Christ Vacation Bible School, and then if we had a friend that went to the Methodist church, we'd go to the Methodist church. And looking back, it may have been babysitting. Might have been babysitting.
Probably so, yeah.
No, but you know, it's free babysitting too. So, but you know, what I mean, it was not a thing where no, you're not going to go there. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't know some people that their parents were like that, but as far as the small country church that I grew up, if I would have told my preacher, hey, we went to my grandmother's Church of Christ Vacation Bible School, he wouldn't have been like, that's it, you're done.
Yeah.
You know,
we
they don't play
probably
the piano.
Yeah, they would all kind of be like, all right, they give you the side eye, yeah.
I don't even know if it would.
But they're not going to be like, those fucking Methodists are going to burn in hell because they're not doing Christianity right. I never noticed anybody doing that.
in Jehovah's Witness.
No, in the other Protestant denomination.
another. Yeah.
Jehovah's Witness would definitely be like, I don't know about that guy.
Yeah.
I can't judge. It's not up to me, but chances are they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
They're not going to make it.
It seems to me the Jehovah's Witnesses are very literal.
Yes.
In the
Very literal.
in the
Everything
sense.
in there is literal.
Yeah.
In the Bible is very literal.
Let me ask you a question, man.
Sure.
I guess I could go for you too. Do you believe like Adam and Eve were real, tangible people, or do you believe in them as like anachronistic? Is that the term?
Well, I don't believe in them at all. So.
I mean, like, but Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh yeah, they
I'm
were
with you.
actual people. Yeah.
Okay.
They were real people.
Yeah, no, I think the doctrine would say they were real people too.
first
I
two
mean,
people.
to be fair and honest, I never I guess put my own thought into that. Like, do I think they were real people? Do I think this is an allegorical lesson or however?
Allegory. That was the word I was looking for. Not anachronistic. That's not the word.
But yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like me personally that I look at a lot of stuff as allegorical lessons. Not to say that I don't believe, I'm not willing to say that or anything like that, but just in general, that's how I would probably look at it. And some of that may have come from, I don't know if I've said this, but I'm a Freemason as well. So a lot of Freemason stuff.
Hey, I used to be one, but I don't pay dues.
A lot of Freemason stuff is allegorical. So, which brings me to another question, because I'm sure you've heard or know the ties between Freemasonry and Mormonism.
Yeah, but they deny that shit.
I don't know this.
So
What's going on?
active Mormons will deny that, like, a lot of the founding members. So, are you familiar with like the temple ceremony, Mormon temple ceremonies?
Not at all.
It's been years since I've been through it. Like, you could go every week. You could go like multiple times a week if you're a retiree to the temple, and you go through like they call them it. I think it's an endowment session. I can't think of the word, but you go through basically the whole story of like Adam and Eve, essentially, and like that's where you get the jokingly referred to as like the magic underwear, the garments that Mormons wear under their clothes. So temple worthy members basically wear those. Like if you've been to the temple, you wear the garments.
Did you have some?
Oh yeah, dude. I wore them for years. You sleep in them. Like the only time you don't wear them is like if you go to the gym. Basically any activity that you can reasonably wear them and you should wear them. But then you judge other people like, so if they went on like a hike, like an easy hike, and like the wife wore a tank top or like the husband wore a tank top, you'd be like, they're not like that faithful, bro. Like you could have worn your garments for that activity. So it was like dick measuring essentially in Mormonism, especially in Utah and Arizona, those type of places. That's a big thing. Or like
Wow.
she's wearing shorts. You're like, oh, there's no way she could wear garments with those shorts. Like they're falling away from the church, or they're not that faithful.
So
or they're
even
not gonna
even just
make
one
it.
day out of the week, you
Oh
get,
no, dude!
Really?
At one point, I think it was like a specific. Like I remember it. My wife doesn't, but they would ask, and maybe they just asked men, "Do you wear garments when you do yard work?" Because apparently that was becoming a problem. Like you go take your shirt off when you're like digging holes, and like, oh, bro, you can't do that.
Really?
Like God can't protect you. And they have like all the stories. Oh, well, so and so was in a car wreck, and the car caught on fire, and his body burned everywhere there wasn't garments. Like. Or the bullet, like somebody shot at him in a crossfire at work, and like it hit his arm, but it was right below his garment line.
I'll tell you something that really surprised me on the garment talk, right? Because years ago, I'm talking to this guy, and I was like, come on, man, is it real?
Yeah.
The underwear? And he's like, yeah. And I said, explain that to me. And in my mind, what I thought the explanation was going to be was it's a reminder to live the right way. It's a constant reminder. You're wearing it. It's a constant reminder. And so when he said the supernatural part of it, and I don't want to discredit anything, right? But it was
sure you do,
because
because these are cults. So don't be afraid.
No,
to talk
just me
shit about
in
them.
general. I don't want to. I'll leave that to y'all if that's the way y'all want to go. But it was really shocking to me because I can see if it would have been answered like it's a constant reminder, like a rosary around your neck or
That's
something
the
like that.
nice answer, and like that's the official doctrine. Like that everybody could pick up a book from the church and read. It would be like, oh, it's a symbol of our faith. But then you've got prophets and apostles that have given talks at like firesides where it's like specifically members who have spent extra time to go hear this guy talk or bought, the CDs or whatever, the audio book. And they'll say like, oh no, dude, it absolutely protects you. Like the supernatural side.
Wow,
They
that's
get their cake
bonkers.
and eat it too.
It was shocking to me because and I don't want to, like I said, I'm not whatever if you think they're magical. But it was
They're
really
holy, bro. They're
holy.
Holy,
Okay.
they're imbued with the Holy Spirit,
So,
bro.
but it was shocking to me because
I don't understand why it wouldn't protect your whole body though.
So pioneers like Brigham Young, Joseph Smith days, it was like long underwear, like with the butt flap and everything, even the women. So like the polygamists, which is a break off of the LDS church, which we'll probably get into at some point, but theirs go down to their wrists and their ankles. So like it was a full body protection. And that's one of those things too, where after leaving the church, because the church will say like God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change, his doctrines don't change.
Right.
But the garments have gotten like progressively shorter, especially for women. And like, oh, well, now we make ones like with a deeper V. So like if you're breastfeeding. So like now you can show more cleavage with those ones. So like women will buy those that aren't breastfeeding and they get judged internally from the church.
You have to
members.
buy these from the church.
Deseret book, yeah. Or like at the temples, they'll have, I think they call them a distribution center. But you have to show like a valid active temple recommend. It's got a barcode. So they'll scan it. And if you're not like, it's in good standing, you can't buy them.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay,
So to come back
Not-
to the masonry,
Yes,
I apologize.
yeah.
So Joseph Smith became, is it Master Mason?
yes.
So, and like it was 2 to 4 weeks. Within 2 to 4 weeks of him going through the ceremony, he comes out with the temple ceremony, which is like 99% identical to the Masonic ceremony that he just did. And he's like, oh, well,
it is a cool ceremony.
the Masons had truth, but they bastardized God's teachings. And so I'm taking it back.
Oh, interesting.
Which is funny because Masonry is very open about it not open, but we're not a religion. Do not offer salvation.
Yeah.
Right.
You practice within your own religion.
Yeah, as long as you believe in God, you can be a
in
Mason.
a single deity. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
a single. You can't be a Hindu
no. Yeah.
So
or
that's
black.
a lot of that with
That's
Joseph
not true
Smith
either.
is-
Don't do that. We're
Well,
not
it was
go
very
down-
true when I was in it.
We're
so.
not going to go down that right now. That's not true.
No, I mean Mormons are the same, dude. Like blacks couldn't have the priesthood until like the late 70s or some crazy shit. And
Really?
they were like anti-civil rights movement, which they'll deny now.
Yeah, of course.
And
they
they'll just
would.
convince their members. They'll be like, "Oh no, dude, we never said that." And they're like, "Well, I read it right here." And they're like, "No, dude, we didn't say that." So yeah, and then apparently because of that, like Mormons couldn't start Masonic temples or lodges until like 30 years ago because Joseph Smith like hijacked, he like stole that shit because you make like your sacred vows or whatever
Yeah.
you guys want to call them. With like the temple, like we call them sacred vows, but from what I understand, that it was like an identical ceremony. He just put God in there.
Wow, I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
The church will deny it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even some of the symbolism that's used in Masonry, from what I've been told, is also
The compass and the square.
yeah.
Yeah, so the garments have that. They have a compass on one breast, and then like a square, looks like a 90-degree angle.
Really?
So he raised her arm to
He
the
did
square.
just rip it straight out.
And then
straight
they've
out.
got
That's
a
great.
mark on the knee, like every knee shall bow or something like. And I don't know if that's Masonic as well, but that's something maybe they added. And then there's one on the navel, like health in the navel. So there's like a line embroidered
Is that where
or
you can
stitched.
commit seppuku? So when you fuck up too bad.
So yeah, so in temples, like they just took that out in the 90s because you would take a vow that like if you told anybody what was going on in the temple, essentially, that you would like kill yourself, and they did like the sign of like neck to neck.
Wow, you guys are hardcore.
And then, well, that wasn't when I went through, but yeah, like they changed that in the 90s, and that was from the. Did you guys do that in masonry? That you'll kill yourself?
I'm not.
We're
I'm
not-
not
we're
gonna.
not
I
permitted
guess you
to say
can't.
that.
Okay.
Not permitted to say anything about that.
Well, that's just an answer right there. So yeah. Anyways,
Well, I'll talk about me being a Mason and everything, but I don't. But I'm
the
not
ceremony itself. 'Cause,
Yeah,
the
I mean, you
ceremony
take
itself.
the commitment seriously, which I respect.
Yeah. And I'm
that
not an
wasn't changed till
active
the
member, but I
90s.
won't say shit about it either.
So when Mitt Romney was running for president, because I didn't know that that had been changed, and they're like, "Oh, well, you know, he took a vow to kill himself if he doesn't do what the prophet says. So like, you can't elect him as president because you know he's got strings being pulled because of what went on in the temple." And I'm like, "We don't do that in the temple," but no, like they did do
used
that
to.
until the 90s.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
So it's kind of, and maybe I'm wrong on this. I'm sure you'll be able to. The Jehovah's Witness deal. I've always been told that it was basically a printing company that morphed into the Jehovah's Witness or a religion.
No. It started by this guy named Charles Taze Russell, which I think is a cool middle name, Taze. And he was a member of the Adventist movement back in the 1870s, 1860s. Everybody, huh?
Oh no, go ahead.
you
I'm
say
sorry.
Seventh Day Adventist?
Well, not Seventh Day Adventist.
That was my question.
There wasn't just there's multiple Adventist organizations back then.
And when was this? I'm sorry.
In the 1860s and 70s, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was because everybody was like, "Oh, Jesus is coming back pretty soon." You know, it's turn of millennial, turn
Yeah,
of the
that was a
century.
big deal with Adventist.
Yes, yeah, they were real into it. So he was a part of that. I don't remember what he did, what he was before. It might have been Presbyterian or something. But somehow, I can't remember exactly. It's been a long time since I read this stuff. But he got involved with this Adventist group, and boy, they had some wacky shit back in the day, like pyramidology, where they looked at the Great Pyramid of Egypt and used that to explain things in the Bible, and yeah, some fun stuff.
We still do that on our money, by the way.
Yes, I know.
Just-
I know. But anyway, so he started the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society to, he started the religion, but the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was founded to help spread the religion. So it came after the idea of the religion, but it was basically to publish his books at first. Then they started making the magazine, the Watchtower, and they would go around and sell. They used to sell it to people. Now they just give it away.
So to publish his books
Yeah.
through sounds a lot like Scientology.
It was way before Scientology.
I know it was way before.
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
Do you view it like now that you're out? Do you view that as like a money making venture? Like, do you
No,
believe that
not
he
at
started
all.
the church as a money making
No,
venture?
not at all. No,
You don't think he did?
No. He was
Okay.
he used to have a haberdashery shop.
Okay.
What
guess-
is that?
I think they sell hats and shit, men's clothing, you know. But he had multiple ones. It was in the fuck was he at? In
So he didn't need the money. Basically, he had like
no,
a chain of
he sold
stores.
all of his when he came up with this idea. I don't remember what the deal was, but when he decided to go into this whole hog, he sold his haberdashery shops, and he was very wealthy for the time. He had over $1 million back in the 1880s,
That's wild,
1870s.
bro.
Yeah, he was rich.
He could have been a Vanderbilt essentially.
He could have
like,
been-
if he'd have
yeah.
kept going with his empire or whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it.
yeah.
Okay.
He could have done it. So he put all of his money into the Watchtower Society to spread this message, printing his books and everything. And when he died, he had nothing. He was broke.
You got to respect that, though.
Yeah,
Like from
He-
y'all's
and
perspective,
his
that's
official
cool.
cause of death was exhaustion because he preached himself to death. So yeah, he was hardcore. He really believed it. He was into it, and he didn't think he was a prophet or anything. He didn't. That's not what he sold himself as. He's just a guy that said, "Look, I've been studying the Bible, and I think I got it figured out, and this is how it is." And
That's interesting too. So
Yeah.
he didn't like view himself as the chosen one.
no, not at all.
So for me, like my perspective, looking at that is like because y'all view.
Well, he kind of
Jehovah's
did
Witnesses
see himself
one
as a
true church.
chosen one,
Okay.
but he wasn't like God wasn't actually coming down and talking to him and handing him golden tablets and shit like that. He just kind of figured it out.
I
You know
like
what I mean?
what you did there. So Joseph Smith, him and his family were like, especially Joseph Smith himself, though, like in his late teens, like 16 to 20, they were treasure hunters, bro.
Yeah.
Like in the early 1800s,
Wow.
like legitimately. In the church, don't tell you that. They don't tell you that, bro. So like him having golden plates, but he was like a treasure hunter. So people would hire them, like Joseph Smith and like one or two of his friends, and they would have magic seer stones or whatever. It was like dowsing rods, in the vein of dowsing rods, but they'd have like seer stones that they would either like hold up to their forehead or they would put it in like a dark hat and put their face in it. Sorry, I put it land away from the mic there. And then either writing would appear on it or like holding it up to their third eye, and then like it would appear into their minds where the treasure was. So you could hire these dudes to come onto your property because there was just this mass belief, especially in New York at the time, that like the Indians had just buried treasure all over the place. So you could hire a dude like Joseph Smith to go help you find your treasure,
That's crazy.
essentially. So
Huh. But even with the money making thing now, like the organization, like everybody that works at they call it Bethel. I think it used to be in Brooklyn, New York, and they sold it all decades ago, a decade or so ago. They sold all their property in Brooklyn. They had 2 massive towers in Brooklyn. They made bank off that shit.
Okay.
But they've got their new facility. I think it's still in New York, but a lot of it's in New Jersey too. Everybody that works there, including the guys that run the whole group, none of them are paid. So there's nobody gets paid to do anything.
That because it's that way in the Mormon church as well, right? So
no.
your preacher get paid?
Oh, okay.
Or-
So there's levels
is
to
it
this.
bishop?
Yeah. So the bishops, stake presidents, like anybody on a local level or like almost a state level, it's just volunteered. Like you're called by God and you feel like elect to do that. But my whole upbringing and even my entire mission, like you would preach people, like the prophets not paid, the 12 apostles aren't paid. Like they were successful in life essentially, and so they don't need that. And I found out later they actually get like a stipend, like depending on your ranking in that, because they have like area 70s as well, which cover geographical areas, like smaller ones. And then they have, I can't think of the term, but other 70s. They have area 70s and then like bigger 70s. And a lot of those guys are paid, but like the 12 apostles and stuff, I think they get over 200 grand a year.
What? Wow.
And so like, but I didn't know that, dude. So when I left the church, like that's part of the things that made me leave. Because
Wow.
like, I look people in the eye and I'm like, dude, they're not paid. They are not paid.
That's what I was getting to, because the handful of conversations I have been, that's always been brought up with both with Jehovah's Witness and Mormons, right? And growing up Baptist or non-denominational or whatever, Protestant, I guess we'll say that. So that was never something that was like, I think it was a selling point, right? It was tried to be a selling point for me, but for me,
we absolutely, it's like elitism. Like, hey man, we're
Right.
like real believers because we don't get paid.
right. And for me,
We never pushed that aspect of it.
well, for me, it was always, anytime I heard it, I was like, I don't know, man, that guy's full-time job seems to me like that's a full-time job if taking care of your flock, right? Whatever, however you want
Seems
to do
reasonable
that.
to make a little bit of money.
It seems reasonable to, and you don't see it so much anymore, but you used to see like the country towns, and not just country towns, but they'd have the parish,
yeah.
for the preacher in a small
little house in the back.
yeah, little house on the back or
Free housing, essentially.
yeah, essentially free housing, and and some kind
That's
of
communism. I'm just kidding.
See, everybody that works at Bethel, they're not paid. They're given a little stipend. It was back in the day when I was going. It was maybe a couple $100 a month for personal stuff. Like,
But at least you were honest about it, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you knew. I didn't know.
oh
They
yeah,
were getting paid.
yeah.
Until I left.
Yeah, they get a little bit of money so they can buy, shampoo, deodorant, maybe go to a movie every once in a while. But it's not much. It's only maybe a few $100s a month, all the way up to the guys on the top. Now they don't have to pay for their food. That's the other crazy thing. Like they own massive amounts of farmland. I think in New York, they raise all of the food to feed the people that work at Bethel, and there's thousands of people that work there, making all the books and everything.
Yeah.
So they don't have to go outside the group for food.
So are you? Let me just back up for a minute,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
think did the people that are working in the print shop? That's volunteer labor.
It's all volunteer.
Wow.
In fact,
I didn't-
In fact, it's kind of a fucking flex on people. If you come to a congregation, they're like, "Oh, what'd you do?" Hey, I just came back. I used to work at Bethel. I worked at Bethel for 3 or 4 years, and they're like, "Oh shit!"
like a
'Cause you have to-
status
yeah,
slash
it's a status
elitism
thing.
thing.
Yeah, because
Okay.
you have to be a very good Jehovah's Witness to get accepted into that, because they only want the best of the best going there. So you'd have like, or the missionary school, which is Gilead, is what they would call it. They'd send you out to other countries, So if you came back and you said, yeah, I just spent a couple years at Bethel or at Gilead, people are like, damn, dude, look at this guy. This guy's holy, man. That's a fucking dude right there.
So with the
And
bishops
the pussy
and
would
stuff,
get wet for you, man.
you got to put out the cones,
And
That's
there you
right,
go.
yeah.
And there it is.
wet floors.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the bishops and stake presidents it's all volunteer. Anything on a local level or like a regional level, it's 100%
Yeah.
unpaid. And you give your time, and like it's viewed as like you shouldn't ever do that like begrudgingly. Like if you're pissed about you have to go, fulfill your calling, basically you have like the spirit of Satan, like you better get your head right.
Yeah.
Because
There-
God chose you for this. That's what it is. So the prophet, right, called of God, can communicate with God, all that.
Yeah.
So like anybody he calls from the top of that pyramid on down to a local level, like, hey, dude, like God called you to this calling. So stake presidents, I think it's every 6 or 7 years, one of the 12 apostles will go to that area and they help interview for the stake president. And so like if you're in the stake presidency, which is usually over, I think like 6 or 7 wards, a ward would be like 150 to 250 people. Like, so when I go to church, I go to a ward. And then the stake president is over multiple wards. So that stake president is actually chosen by one of the 12 apostles. So it's like, imagine Peter, James, or John
Yeah.
showing up, or Paul, and he's like,
a big
dude,
deal, huh?
God called you to this calling. And so like there is elitism with that, but it also validates you sacrificing time with your family that you should be spending, or like going to your kid's baseball game, but you got to go do stake president or bishop shit,
Yeah.
But it's elitism too.
Yeah.
Most of the bishops and stake presidents, I think, just feel bad for themselves because like they're called by God. It's like, dude, how can you feel good about all the time, 40 to 60 hours a week after your job, unpaid, doing this because you're called of God? Like you got to guilt trip yourself into it, man. It's just...
So they're like with the witnesses, there are guys, they don't work. So you got at your local level, you got at the Kingdom Hall, you got your elders. Nobody's paid at the local level. And then you go up to a circuit overseer and a district overseer and a regional overseer, and then you get all the way up to the governing body is what they're called. That's actually what makes all the decisions. They're up in New York. So these, from the circuit overseer all the way up to the regional, they get a small stipend. And usually what a congregation will do is they'll build a little apartment onto the side of the Kingdom Hall or something for the circuit overseer or the district overseer to stay in. That'll be their place. So the congregation, well, actually the whole circuit or district will help support that apartment. And they'll put out a thing, say, hey, the circuit overseer's car broke down. He needs a new one. So we're taking donations for that. So everybody will get together, donate money, and buy this guy a new car.
That's kind of cool, like the sense of community, though. I
Yeah,
do respect
it's not
that.
a brand new car. They'll find a reasonable car that'll get them around. It's not driving around in a Mercedes or something,
Honda, Toyota, something reliable.
Yeah.
Something
So they'll find them a car, and they can live in that apartment. They don't have to pay any rent. The bills are taken care of by the whole circuit, by that Kingdom Hall. The transportation is taken care of. So they'll just get a little stipend just to cover their daily expenses. That's about all they get.
But if you're volunteering that much time, like in my opinion, you should be paid.
They don't want to be paid because that's not what they're doing.
I say paid, I mean like those expenses being.
Oh
covered
yeah.
makes
You
sense.
gotta have something.
So
Because
I don't
you can't
begrudge-
expect somebody to do that without anything.
Okay. Yeah. It's like I don't begrudge, and I should clarify on that. Like the leaders of my church, former church, getting paid. I don't care. I care that they lie about it. Mm-hmm. I care that it's, that I was told they weren't paid. And then when push comes to shove and you ask them, they're like, well, no, they just get like this amount a year to live. It's like, bro, like 200 grand
200 grand's a lot.
plus, 200 grand plus. And they get to fly around on private jets all the time, dude. Like they get that on top of all of their other shit being paid for.
See, our guys, they fly coach.
But I mean, they're real believers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to get punched in the face by a bunch of Mormons after this.
Damn.
Y'all are real believers.
We're fucking hardcore, dude.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of weird similarities and then not a lot of similarities at the same time.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, he'll say terms, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the same word. How do you guys use that word? That's our word.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I mean, you
apostate
guys
and
probably
shit,
had the
so-
word first. I think you guys came first. We didn't come around till about the 1870s.
We're all just piggybacking off of other religions,
Yeah.
anyways, man. Joseph Smith was like, I refer to him now as like a great compiler. He took things that he liked. Like, he took the Masonic symbol, and he's like, bro, I can totally I'll just make a temple. I'll make this like a whole holy thing, and it allows me, it's like elitism. Like, it'll set us apart from other religions. Like, he just picked and chose what he liked from all these different faiths, and it worked because he's like, every religion has some of the truth. So as he's compiling all of this massive bullshit pile, when people question it, he's like, oh no, dude, like Satan took over and like bastardized the truth, and I'm just bringing it back, bro. Like I'm bringing sexy back.
Yeah, that's what we.
So
had
when
too.
people question it, it's like, well, yeah, no, of course the Jehovah's Witnesses do that. Like they have part of the truth. Of course, they're good people, you know? We have all of it. So he's like a great compiler, bro.
Yeah, that's the way we looked at it too. Yeah.
So I think you said it earlier when you started digging into this and possibly thinking about or leaving, seeking out the truth for you, or however you wanted to do it. You looked at other religions, not necessarily other denominations or just
I looked
other
at every
religions.
religion I could think of.
Other denominations, I guess that would be my question. Did you look at other denominations?
I looked at the
within
ones for the
Christian faith?
South. Yeah, I looked at Catholicism. I looked at Southern Baptist, Methodist. Those were easy because
They're easy to get to.
Yeah, Lutheran too. Or no, it's not Lutheran. Episcopalian. Because
It's like Catholic light.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because at my house, I had right by my house, I had a Episcopalian, a Southern Baptist church, a Methodist church, which we were constantly at war with at my house because, man, they put in this parking lot and they directed all the rainwater to flood into our yard, so it'd flood our house. So we were constantly battling them for that. They were complete assholes, which
Like
turned me
your
off.
your house that you grew up in.
Yeah.
And the church across the street. Like,
Yeah, they were right behind us. Right behind us. They'd flood our fucking house every time it rained.
So what about you? Did you look into other denominations, or were you just like, I'm done? And
So-
I have don't let me forget, because I actually have a question off of this.
Yes. So, and I should give credit where credit's due. So he's my former brother-in-law. So we jokingly say like we kept him in the divorce when him and my
Okay.
sister split up. But he moved out here to Texas from Utah. He just wasn't in a good spot at the time. So he needed to get his head on straight. And I'm like, look, dude, like I could use the help. I can pay you this much if you want to come out here. And so I should give credit to libertarianism for helping me lead, because it helped me become more logical and looking at U.S. history as it actually is, not the way that it was written in the history books. So for me, looking at Mormonism, like it's like U.S. citizens, they only get history from what the school teaches. It's like Mormons only get their church's history from what the church wants them to know. And so learning, I think that libertarianism helped me look at my own religion critically. So he left the church around the time he came out, or right after the time he came out. And when I was on my mission, so I served my mission, which is 2 years in Southern California, Cavalry Church and Saddleback was founded in my mission. So Southern California, big old giant born again Christian church, Saddleback. Like the dude gave the opening prayer at Obama's inauguration or something like that. But they and Cavalry would teach anti-Mormon classes. Like part of those faiths, those born again Christian churches, especially in Southern California, was to teach anti-Mormon classes. So like they'd have like 2 hours of church and like, hey dude, it's like a college thing. Like you just pick where you want to spend your second hour. And we're like, dude, let's go learn about the Mormons. And they would give them our scriptures, because like Mormons have their own books. Like they have the Book of Mormon and then Doctrine and Covenants, which is another book. And then the Pearl of Great Price is another book.
Because I never read that last one. I read Doctrine and Covenants in the Book of Mormon.
Okay. So you knock on doors in Southern California and they'd be like, oh yeah, dude, we love Jesus. Like come on in. And then you sit down and all of a sudden they pull out our scriptures and it's all highlighted and they start tearing your ass up one side and down the other with your own scriptures. Like that's a whole different setting.
Yeah, that's fun.
So that was my mission. So when my former brother-in-law left the church, he'd be like, oh yeah, well I'm leaving it over history. And I'm like, shit, bro. Like I know all that from my mission. Like I heard like all the worst stuff. Like I would argue with people that I would call it Bible bashing. So I'm like, well, what'd you read? Cause I'm like, oh dude, I can convince this guy to come back to the faith. Cause I've read it all. Like I heard all this stuff. Like we would go to baptize people, and then like a week before they'd get baptized, they'd have like 30 pages of anti-Mormon, once again in quotations, anti-Mormon literature, which was just factual history of the church essentially, that they'd pull out, and we'd like go through all this stuff. So I thought I knew everything. So he starts telling me some of the stuff, and I'm like trying to discredit it and doing the whole, workaround and like you just need to have more faith type thing. And some of the shit he would say, I'm like, bro, that's a little much. Like I don't know if I can get my head around that one. Like I thought I knew everything.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my slow burn, which was really only a few months. But because of like my ADHD and you get hyper focused on topics.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I got to give him credit for helping me get out of it. But that's where it all started, was kind of with him and me thinking I could convince him to come back. And I apologize because I forgot your original question at this point.
So did you look at any other denominations? as you were?
No, so because part of the way that I left the church was finding out, so the gospels in the Bible, right? Like the Gospel of Matthew or whatever. Those histories, the earliest one, from what I understand, historically was written 30 years after Christ had died. Mm-hmm. Most of them were in the 50 to 60 year range.
Yeah.
And there's like no written record before that. And
Right.
so like looking at how the church even changed things over like a 5 or a 10-year period.
That's not counting all the other gospels that were omitted whenever the church sat down and decided these are going to be the books.
So we use the King James version of the Bible. So it was a lot more limited and narrow anyways.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, like part of deconstructing my faith was, I don't want to say deconstructing Christianity because that might be a little harsh, but at the same time, if I'm being honest, like, yeah. What was the word that Chris used? Apathist?
That's this guy.
Apatheist.
Yeah, I'm with that, bro.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bitter and resentful towards religion in general, but, you know, I know a lot more.
So you're not atheist, or you haven't rejected the idea of God, or what?
I get that and agnostic mixed up in my head, bro. Like, I believe there could be a God, but I also, at the same time, I'm like, I'm just going to be a good person, and I'll take my chances.
Yeah. I went from agnostic to atheist to I'm just apathetic. Like I just got tired of wondering, is there a God? Is there not a God? I don't give a fuck if there's a God. If there is a God, he's a piece of shit. And if there's not, then nothing fucking happened. That doesn't matter.
So part of, like, with me leaving Mormonism, and a lot of ex-Mormons will say this, like, God either is powerful enough that, like, almost like he doesn't care what's happening, like all the shit that's going on here. He's just letting it happen, and it's all the excuses, like, oh, well, these are trials for you.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't have enough power to change anything. But if either one of those is true, then neither one of those gods is worth my time.
Exactly.
So if God's big enough that he's letting all this shit happen,
Yep.
you know, fucking kids get sent home from school early in Maui because of wind, and then they get trapped in their houses and burned to death. And like, God's going to let that happen so that somebody 5 years from now can find Jesus over it, or even that same day. Or he didn't have enough power to stop that. But either way, why is that God worth my time?
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty harsh.
You know, here's what always fucked me up is
Sorry,
No,
JD.
no.
We're into it now. So what always fucked me up is, so you got this guy, he's this being in the sky, right? He's the most powerful thing in the world, right? In the universe. He knows everything. Were you taught that? God knows all, God sees all.
He knows your thoughts.
He knows your thoughts, your hearts. He knows the beginning, the end. He knows everything, right? He knows all this shit. So he knew going in that Adam and Eve were going to sin. He knew the day he created Adam that he was going to fuck it all up. And so after that, he decided, I'm going to make this guy anyway, knowing he's going to fuck up. And I'm going to doom humanity because of this guy's fuck up that I'm about to make. I haven't even made him yet. I'm going to doom them to a lifetime of misery, death, sorrow, everything.
Cancer, bro.
Cancer,
AIDS.
all that shit. I'm going to do this knowing this guy's going to fuck up. And I'm going to punish everybody for this guy's mistake. And if they don't turn around and do what I tell them to do during their 70, 80 years, if they're lucky, life on earth, I'm going to burn them in the lake of fire forever.
Forever.
I
But that's
wish
a
I
loving
was,
God,
That
bro. He
is
loves
not
you.
a loving God. That's a piece of shit.
So anyway, I gotta. I wish I was. Y'all probably. I wish I was better at speaking my points. I'm not. Y'all seem like y'all have really thought a whole lot of this out.
So,
my
go
original question. The reason I was asking that is it a thing? I knew someone that grew up Mormon and left and is now at a non-denominational church, I believe. To me, that's the only person I've ever. That seems very like you just don't hear that story, right? You don't hear someone leaving, going to a more Protestant. I don't know if you even say more Protestant, but just another church. Another. Is that something that you've heard, see of? Or?
Yeah, a lot of people that leave the church, and I don't know if it's 50-50, man, because I don't know a lot of people that have left. I'm a little more private. Like, I'm on a podcast talking about it. I don't advertise on my social. Like, we're friends on Facebook, bro. Like,
Right.
you don't see me sending anti-Mormon church shit. Because honestly, like, it's not that I take a dim view of it, but it's like you just took your extremism and just flipped it, and now you're spending your extremist time against it.
Yes.
So I just want to live my life, dude. Like, I wasted And I gave up all those years, 2 years of my life, like it dictated. And I love my wife. I don't say anything like that, but like it dictated who I married because we had to marry somebody in the faith. And we didn't do it the way that the church condoned or embraced. You know what I mean? Like we had premarital sex and all that.
You didn't soak first? Do the soaking?
No soaking. I think that's a BYU requirement, bro. Do you know what soaking is?
I think so.
It's about what it sounds like,
yeah.
bro. Because if it's not thrusting, there's no sex.
That's right.
It's dry humping, right?
No. You stick it in. You just kind of hang out.
It's just soaking, bro.
Yeah.
Hot dog in a bun. But it's not sex because it is sex. But it's not thrusting. It's the Mormon get around. And the church doesn't endorse it, but it's a BYU, it's a Utah cultural thing.
Oh, okay.
And then like other people in the church will be like, well, we didn't have sex because he didn't finish inside me.
That's like this Bill Clinton saying, bro. I didn't actually fuck the chick. She just sucked my dick.
Yeah. So a lot of people do because I think it's hard for people to let go of like their faith in general. Like I've got a pseudo friend, like we're acquaintances, and they're kind of on their way out of the church, but they won't like fully let go. It's like now they're just latching onto like spirituality instead, which is cool. Like, and I knock it a little bit just because it's not my journey, but I also know that's a personal flaw of mine.
Yeah.
I feel like people should do good things because they're good people. Like, so I look at, diehard Christians or diehard Mormons, and it's like, you guys are only good people because you think there's a reward after this.
Exactly.
Life. Like, I'm a good person because I should be a good person. Yeah. Like, because I should treat other people with respect and kindness, and not because of some deity, but because it's
there's either
right
reward or punishment, and I got to avoid the punishment.
So without bringing God into it, it's like, do unto others how you would have them do unto you, right? Like the golden rule. And so that's just how I choose to live my life.
Yeah.
I don't do it for any reward, but a lot of members, Mormons that leave the church, I think they do latch on to other, whether it's spirituality or another Christian faith, but most won't pick a faith that says it's the one true church. Like they won't go to Jehovah's Witnesses. They're not going to Seventh-day Adventists. They're not going to Catholicism, but they will go to like born-again Christians.
Mm-hmm. Become non-denominational.
Yeah, non-denominational. Thank you. That's the word.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think Jehovah's Witnesses do the same thing. Ex-J-dubs.
Ex-J-dubs?
Yeah.
J-dubs, man. J-dubs. Such a good slang. That's what we used to use, J-dubs, yeah.
J-dubs, yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses, J-dubs.
Yeah.
Or as other people. I always find it funny. People are like, you're a Jehovah? You're one of them Jehovahs? Yeah, I'm a Jehovah's.
I'm a Jehovah.
That's right. I'm Almighty God. That's me.
Oh, wow. No, so the history of it, just something that had popped in my mind earlier when you had said that. Do you remember that show, Hell on Wheels?
Love that show, bro.
Do you remember when that show came out? There were the Mormon church came real quick and were like, hey, we didn't have nothing to do with that.
So I don't remember them saying that, but that doesn't surprise me. Because like Big Love, they showed like part of a temple ceremony, Big Love on HBO about polygamy.
Oh, okay.
I guess they showed, because that was FLDS, which is like fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. That's like
the Warren Jeff stuff. Yeah.
Which we could get into that.
There's a guy at work that's a member of that group.
That's wild, bro.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they had their thing in Texas, their whole big compound.
Yeah.
El Dorado,
Yeah.
where they, he was number 2 on the FBI's most wanted list until Osama bin Laden got
Took the seat.
Wait.
No, he was number 2. No, Osama bin Laden got killed or got whatever. They caught him, however you say that, right?
If they caught him.
If they caught
that's
him.
A whole nother
whatever.
discussion.
However it was, he disappeared off the list and Warren Jeffs went to number 1. And within weeks of him going to number 1, they were like, hey, we better get this guy.
I think I misspoke. I don't think it was FLDS. There's another one, right? Like a reformed
There's
group?
a bunch. So the church has had a bunch of spin-offs, which is also something they use to like say that they're more true. Like, hey man, like we're so true, we have spin-offs of ours. I don't know if they're spin-offs of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses are actually the spin-off.
The spin-off.
Yeah.
Okay.
What did they spin? What did they spin off of?
Man, it's after Russell died, not Russell. Charles Russell died. There was a kind of a power struggle, to see who's going to lead the group. This guy Joseph Rutherford took over, and he took the group the way it is now. But there was also maybe they are the spin-off. I don't know where the main branch or not, but it doesn't fucking matter.
Whichever one has more members.
They used to be called Bible students, not Jehovah's Witnesses. He's the one that introduced the name. Rutherford introduced the name Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay.
So the Bible students and the witnesses, they split. There's still Bible students around, and they still use the original books that Taze wrote. There's 6 of them, and they're interesting. But yeah,
So I know
they're very,
the,
very small.
like the just way out there.
No,
but
we'll come back to Hell on Wheels, but yeah, finish.
Oh, okay.
We kind of got away from that.
Yeah, let's go back to Hell on Wheels. Go ahead.
But from historically, like what I understand, that was a pretty fair description of Brigham Young. Like he ruled with an iron fist, bro. And like, if you didn't do what he said, like you might get killed, dude.
Damn, you guys
And that
are
was
hard,
the thing
man.
is, I don't know. There's no like 100% ironclad proof that he endorsed that blood atonement doctrine, or that he had people do it. Like it's not in his journal. Like I had brother so and so go slit brother so and so's throat, but it was heavily implied in a lot of his teachings, and they did teach blood atonement, and that was like so. But he ruled Utah with an iron fist. Like if you didn't do what he said, like he would out your ass, bro. Like he'd be like they'd run you out of Utah if you didn't do what he said.
That's what I find fascinating about the Mormons, man, is how fucking hardcore. Like I didn't know any of this. You guys were rough, dude.
But they'll use the church history like when it benefits them, like if your heritage, like, oh man, we came across the plains with Brigham Young, like my great great grandfather. It's like Republicans that are like, oh, you know, my grandpa was a Republican and my dad was a Republican. Like I can't be anything but a Republican. And there's Mormons like that too. I think it's psychosis.
It's like Texans that are like, hey, my family was part of the original 300.
No, it's exactly like that, bro. I mean, there's
I met a guy that's his
it's
family went back
elitism.
there.
Yeah.
Elitism. So they'll use those things when it benefits them, and then they'll distance themselves from it when it becomes a stain. It's like Hell on Wheels. Like, oh, we didn't have anything to do with that, and that's not how we were. And it's like, bro, that's Brigham Young right there. Like, yeah. I mean, he was probably dumber than that character was. Like, he wasn't like very educated, but he was very firm. He got what he wanted, and he did have
a thug,
shit
huh?
ton of wives. Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, how could you not be? Like, these people literally like think anything you say like is literally coming from God's mouth.
Yeah, that's
And
part.
he'll kick you out of an entire massive geographical area if you don't do what he says. And these people will pick up and move. If you're like, you know, God told me you need to move 300 miles across the state of Utah and go start a cotton plant in southern Utah in the desert. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, bro, I'm gone next week. And they're, can I sell my house first? No, you're going to donate that to the church. Awesome. Sounds good. I'm out of here, bro.
Wow.
Well, and then too, I can't imagine at the time. I know there's a lot of, what's the word? I know there was a lot of anti-Mormon kind of movements. I mean, we just kind of spoke on the Southern California thing, but even, I mean, going back a long way. So you imagine getting kicked out of Utah, and then go somewhere else where you're probably that it somehow follows you there as well, right? So you're not even wanted there in that community.
No, so Utahns got, I mean, they're basically kicked out of New York, and they were kicked out of Ohio and Missouri. So when like the prophet was killed, so Missouri, they actually passed a law called the Extermination Order that it was legal to kill Mormons, which is wild, bro. And that didn't get
brutal.
rescinded until like the late 1900s.
Really?
I don't know, 80s, 90s. It was a long time, like where it was like on the books, like one of those weird laws.
So if you saw a Mormon, you could walk up to him, blast him in the face, and nothing would happen to you.
I mean, like essentially that was kind of the rule. Yeah,
Wow.
they didn't want them in the
That's
state
awesome.
anymore. But a lot of that actually had to do with polygamy, and Mormons won't admit that. But I mean, because it was essentially pedophilia, like Joseph Smith. So one of the wives, so they'll acknowledge it now because they can't hide it. So he married a 14-year-old, and the church's runaround is she was a few months shy of her 15th birthday, and it's like, bro, like that's what you're gonna say. And that's
Yeah, but
legit, like in their writings. Well, she was a few months. One of his wives was a few months shy of her 15th birthday.
But I feel like that wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a very common practice, but it wasn't an unheard of practice to marry.
I don't.
Not
to
the
marry
polygamy,
young.
to marry young.
Yeah, I mean, even I mean, I have family way back that married way young like that.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. It was a different time, different, you know.
It looks bad with the optics today, but
No, but that's kind of a misconception though, because if you look at like census information from
Right,
back
it
then,
wasn't-
the
it wasn't
average age
common
is still like
in
18 to
18 to 20.
21.
Yes.
So it's not uncommon, but it was still like,
Yeah, for sure. It was still probably child bride, right,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
not
but
as
it probably
bad.
happened. It probably happened a lot more on farms
Yeah.
in rural communities
Rural,
on the
yeah.
farm than anything else.
So part of what Joseph Smith would do too, like, so for example, the wife would die in a family, right? Member family. And this happened multiple times. And Joseph would be like, you know what, man, your head's not in the right spot. Like the husband, like, JD, you know, I'm sorry your wife died. Your head's not in the right spot. What we're going to do is we're going to send you on like a 4-year mission to Europe or another state in the U.S. Like they go to Europe a lot of converts in Europe. So we're going to send you on a mission, and like what we'll do, man, like 'cause I'm the prophet, I'm a good dude. Like I'm going to house your kids while you're on your mission. We'll take good care of them. They'll be with members. Like, you know me, I'm the prophet. It's all good, bro. Dad goes,
How could you turn that down?
starts grooming the 14, 15, 16-year-old girl and marry him.
Damn.
So it's grooming. It's pedophilia.
Yeah.
And it makes me sick. And like members have denied, like, you can't call our prophet. I mean, like, imagine calling, you know, John or Paul or, you know, whatever, a pedophile. But it's like, bro, like, by definition, that's what he is. And he
Yeah.
was a groomer.
Interesting. There's been pedophilia accusations within like Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, like you'll find like an elder or somebody or just a regular member of the Kingdom Hall diddle some kids or whatever. And the elders or whatever will try to cover it up and take care of it in house. That's pretty bad.
Well, it's like
but it's not
Spotlight,
like
right?
a
That movie Spotlight about Catholicism.
yeah.
Mormons were a big part of the Boy Scouts of America.
Yeah.
That lawsuit.
Yep.
Because the church 100% endorsed. Like, I'm an Eagle Scout, bro. And luckily, I was never molested. Like, none of my leaders that I knew about got in trouble for that. But like, you send your kids on those weekend getaways, bro. And they were Boy Scouts of America were bouncing their leaders around that were pedophiles. It's like the Catholicism. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
No Christian background and, you know, Boy Scouts of America. Well, kind of, but not really. But it's just interesting. They kind of use the same structure that Catholics did. Like, oh, we're going to send you to another state.
Yeah. For all the ones that happened
That
with the
must
witnesses.
have been that must have been higher up with the Boy Scouts because I was a Boy Scout as well, and yeah, I mean it was a great experience growing
Yeah.
up. But
Was he gentle when he?
anyway, this guy, you can't say anything.
We did, yeah. Well, we had that whole dialogue before we started here about he's a great tipper.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, but so I don't know. I mean, maybe higher up as far as moving around. I'm not familiar on the because
Most people didn't know about it until it got blown out into the public.
Well, it's just the cover up internally.
Yeah.
It's kind of more what I was getting
Okay.
at. So
Yeah.
the church has gotten in a lot of trouble for that recently now. You hear about that big one in Arizona
No.
where that, I don't know if it was the dad or the stepdad, but he was like molesting, dude, like down to the infant level.
Oh, Jesus.
The kids in this house. And like the bishop knew about it and the stake president knew about it, but the church, there's a whole podcast episode. I apologize. So I don't know. I can't remember all of the details with it, but the bishops, so they have a handbook and stake presidents. They have a handbook that the church writes. So like an encyclopedia of anything that happens, what you should do if you don't know what to do. And so in that, they have a hotline number, basically 24-hour access to this massive law firm in Salt Lake that the church is just basically has all their on lock. So they call them, and what happens is like they start defending the actual pedophile. So the church starts working on their own defense first,
Wow.
and also the violator, because they've got to cover their own bases. So
Yeah.
they don't provide the relief to the actual victims, because the church called them to that calling. So like the church calls you to be over young men's, for example. And then it comes out 3 years later that you've been molesting boys for 3 years. Well, the church put you in that position, which is also God put you in that position because
Right.
your bishop is called of God.
It's pretty
So spirit of discernment.
standard for God, though, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Pedophile.
Nope.
No, don't go down that road. So the church has to,
a mass
legally,
murder,
they
so-
have to do that. It's like they have to defend the person because they put them in that position. The way that our legal system is set up in liability.
See, it would look so much better for them to be like, hey, this guy's a fucking diddler.
Yeah.
You got to put his ass in the dirt.
But they don't.
We're
and
going to
then
do the blood atonement on this cocksucker.
they tell the victims too. They'll be like, look, like you need to forgive that person. Like they messed up, but you know, it's going to make the church look bad if you press charges against them. This is God's true church, and it reflects on God's true church if the people we call did that, and you're calling them out and bringing a public light on this.
I think that's
So
how
what
the
we need
J-Dubs
you-
operated as well with their cases.
and that would make sense. So we're going to put pressure on you to not, and you're gonna be the bigger Christian, and you're gonna forgive that person, and we're not going to talk about it, and we're going to move on,
Yeah.
and God will bless you for it, because God's not going to bless you if the church has to spend money on attorneys, or Mormons are all over the news over pedophilia.
I didn't realize
So
that
it's
Mormon.
victim blaming.
I didn't realize not to change, but I didn't realize they were losing. Because I know for a long time they claimed
All
to be
religions are losing.
Well, that's right, but I know for a long. I mean, any, and I hesitate to call churches civic organizations, but all civic organizations are losing membership, right? With what you have capability now, you're not going there for your social activity like you did once at one, or like people did at one point in time.
Yeah.
People are getting that. That's another conversation, but I mean, getting that in different areas. But I know for a long time they claimed to be the fastest growing. I don't know if it was denomination or how they
Whatever
qualified
term,
that
church,
statement. Yeah,
religion.
church. However, it is, and I've heard some talk on that too. I don't know how much of that is. I never went to an anti-Mormon class, but I'm sure I heard some anti-Mormon rhetoric. Maybe, I don't know.
Rhetoric's a good word.
Yeah.
So the church now, what they do is they kind of, unless you get an attorney to send them a letter to get you removed from the church's records. So even if you haven't been to church in 10 years, if you haven't gotten your name removed from the church's records, like Jehovah's Witnesses, they keep the records, you mentioned that, they will report your numbers as a member. So even though they're losing tons and tons of people and tons of revenue, they, up until like, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, every general conference was twice a year. It's like a weekend-long deal where the apostles and the prophets and all the higher-ups in the church speak. Not all of them, but it's like, oh, well, you know, brother so-and-so, you were called by God to come and speak. And they're higher up in the church. The 12 apostles all speak at least once over the weekend. But the lowers, whatever, you're randomly chosen or by the Spirit, whatever term you want to use. But they used to report the number of members until like 10-ish years ago. But because the number started decreasing, and God's church is supposed to be taking over the world, right? Like these are the chosen times, and God's church was the fastest growing. And now that it's decreasing in size, they don't report the numbers anymore, essentially. And then they try to keep them as inflated as possible with kind of the route that I mentioned. Like unless you physically send in a letter, and now like a lot of former members that are attorneys provide that service for free, where they'll like, you know, attorney so-and-so with the letterhead, and, you know, legally they'll list the statute or whatever that you have to legally remove them because they've requested it, then they'll do it. And it still takes them sometimes 6 to 12 months. When they
So,
could
and
do
that
it
wouldn't
day.
be for anything other than just that person I want off the records. I mean, it's not like, say someone that left the church and they hire this attorney that's providing this service. I want to be off the records just because I don't want to be on those records anymore, or what? Is there any other reason that they may not want to be on those records?
Part of it's for appearances too, so the church can't use them anymore as like a tool to
Okay.
convince other people to join. So like you get the missionaries going to door, and they'll be like, oh, we have 15 million members all over the world. And it's like, I don't want to be one of those numbers that you use to trick people into joining your cult. So it's kind of principle based, or like some people are really bitter about it because they spent so much of their life. I mean, Mormons are required to give 10% of their income, and the church doesn't specify. So like some members believe that's 10% of your gross. So like even though you never got that money because taxes are being taken out of your paycheck, when you get your gross at the end of the year, like you should be paying on that amount. So it's kind of like levels of diehard Mormonism with tithing. And some people will just do 10%, you know, after taxes because that's more fair. That's actually your take home, but you're giving 10% of your income. And on top of that, they do what's called fast offerings. So once a month, one Sunday a month, you miss, I think it's 2 or 3 meals, like a day's worth of meals. And you fast like you're supposed to feel the Spirit, when really that's like chemical imbalances in your, but we don't get into that right now. That's science, which, you know, Mormons are iffy on science. We don't talk about that. So you donate the cost of those meals to the church, like that you would have paid for your family to eat. So you're doing 10%. You're doing fast offerings or any other donation you want. Some people will donate to the mission fund because missions cost, like, if you send your kid on a mission, you're supposed to be paying like $1,500 a month. So you're paying for your child to give up 2 years, to put their life on hold for 2 years, to not go to college, to miss out on college sports if they were an athlete, to not get married, to not date, to not do anything, to go give up 2 years to go spread the cult's beliefs. And you're paying $1,500 a month or more for your child to go do that. So some older members will still pay that to help poorer families that can't afford it, because the church will cover it if they have to. But they put pressure on you to pay for it or to make it work, because God will bless you if you're sacrificing. Once again, it kind of goes back to with the Jehovah's Witness beliefs. Like the more you suffer, the more blessed you are. Like you're more chosen because you're suffering more, which I think a lot of Christian faiths believe that. Like God's just challenging me. But especially in these cults,
we didn't really have that concept. No,
that's a big thing, bro.
No,
because
we'd always say God doesn't test people. Bible says God doesn't test you.
Difference then.
The devil will test you. The devil is trying to. So if you're going through a hard time, it's not because anything God did. It's because the devil was trying to turn you away. So you have to devote yourself more to God.
So we kind of get both with Mormonism. So there's like a doctrine that God will never give you more than you can handle. So like if your wife dies or like your kid dies or something, and like you're just an emotional wreck, you justify it with like, God knew you could handle this. That's why you're having this trial. So like another member of the ward whose life seems perfect and their family members aren't dying, like you're actually more faithful, or God believes in you more because you're having this trial. So that's why Utah has such high levels of depression as well. Because it's like, if you're struggling with something, but you know God wouldn't have given you that trial if you couldn't overcome it, but now you're not overcoming it, like you're not faithful enough. So it's kind of in line with what you were saying, like, Satan challenges you and this is a hurdle for you to jump through. But like on the Mormon side, it's like, well, they don't really say it's Satan. It's more like you're having this trial, but God knows you can handle it.
No, that's not the way the J-Dubs do it.
Or like you've got cancer and like, but you can handle this, bro. Like God wouldn't have let you get cancer if you couldn't handle this shit.
Oh, no, that's not.
And you're allowed to get medicine in Mormonism. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
That's not what I ment by science when I said that a minute ago.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, because that is a pretty big difference, right? Because there's no, what is it with the Jehovah's Witnesses? There's no blood transfusions,
Yeah, no
right?
blood transfusions.
Is there anything? Is there any other modern
it.
medicine that's
No,
not?
that's it.
I don't know. That's interesting. What's the reasoning behind that?
Because in the what?
No, I was just no. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
I was saying the most literal way, right? Your blood.
Yeah, because in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when God was talking about doing sacrifices and stuff, he told the priest, don't eat the blood because the blood belongs to God. That's where the spirit is. So you don't eat blood. So if you're not gonna eat blood, why would you take somebody else's blood and put it in your body? That doesn't make any sense.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Very literal on that side then. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm wrong on there though, because I thought your blood being your blood out of the 100, is it 180,000? The the literal 144,000. It's your blood that's what I've always heard. It was your blood that qualified you into that group. So if you took someone else's blood, so that's not.
No, it goes back to the wherever in the Mosaic law, he told the priest, hey, you can, when you sacrifice an animal, set aside the best ones for me, but you don't eat any of the blood from the animals because that's holy, belongs to God, pour it on the ground.
Okay.
It's not for you. So the logic then is, if you can't eat,
Homies.
pour it out for the homies, yeah. So if you can't eat animal blood, then it stands to reason you can't inject somebody else's blood into your body. That would be a violation of God's law.
I mean, I can see that, but also like that's wild. But like you're talking about animals versus people and saving a life when you're one of God's children.
I mean, there are lots of stories. Even people that
That's logical, bro. You don't get logic with religion. That's not really a crossover.
There's
That'd be an amazing crossover.
Yeah, that's their
Marvel
logic
and
for
DC
it. And
crossover.
also their logic is, look, it's okay. If you die, it's not a big deal. You'll be resurrected. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I've
resurrection's a big deal.
heard stories before of like a guy marries a woman. She's a Jehovah's Witness. He converts to Jehovah's Witness, so they're married now. Gets in a wreck or something like that. Needs a blood transfusion. Parents are trying everything. His parents are trying everything to get the blood transfusion, but the Jehovah's Witness, his wife is now his medical. So he's in a coma.
Oh, it gets
or whatever.
worse than that. It goes down to kids. So if you've got children that are bleeding out, and you got two Jehovah's Witness family, the doctor's like, this kid needs blood or he's going to die. They're like, that sucks for him.
That's like John Travolta's kid too with Scientology, bro. Like they made it like you can't interfere with religious beliefs to save a life because
Yeah.
Scientologists don't believe in modern medicine.
They don't believe
you
in
remember
modern
that?
psychology.
Well, no, but Tom Cruise said he's like, there's a car accident. It's better if I'm there than a doctor because he's X amount high up in Scientology.
Oh,
like
wow.
part of their belief is like you're unlocking levels of like spirituality. The more money you donate to their church, which Scientology is just fascinating to me.
Sure.
It's
It's a great scam. I wish I'd come up with it.
beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful scam.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, so it's just like I can see crossovers with Scientology in that regard, which like Scientologists would be pissed if I said that, and Jehovah's Witnesses are pissed that I'm saying that. But like, we don't do the blood thing. We don't do the modern medicine thing. Not we in the literal.
Yeah.
What is the term? You know what I mean? We as in everybody are those faiths. But
One of the cool things that came about from that no blood thing, though, is it forced surgeons to get better at doing their job.
Yeah, I mean,
So they've come up with all kinds of advanced techniques to deal with people, like if you're going in for a surgery that typically is could be a lot of blood loss.
Like
a lot of times they don't give a
whatever.
shit because they can just pump more blood into you, keep your blood volumes up. So knowing that there's this guy coming in that's not going to take a transfusion, it forces the surgeon to go, okay, we have to do something different and be more efficient with what we're doing.
Interesting, okay.
So yeah, it
less
like,
invasive. Kind of
yes, yeah.
All right, so let me ask you a question. So this is one thing that has caused a lot of like women to leave the church and men too, but especially women. So the church is big on like they're I can't think of the word, surrogacy.
really,
Yeah. So like you putting your eggs
right?
in a person, or like you carrying somebody else's
Yeah, for
child.
whatever reason, the wife can't carry a baby, so
So a lot of like the LDS church believes is like the pre-existence. So like everybody that's ever lived on this earth was a spirit child with God before they came here.
Oh man, I wanted to get into that one later.
So, okay.
let's do it now.
Okay.
So, well, because it kind of goes along with the medical thing. So this is the
Yeah.
only medical thing that I really see in the church now. So like donating or selling your eggs is like a big no-no, because I think it's more viewed as like God blessed you with reproductivity. If that's a term. Is that a term? Seems like a term.
It is today.
Sounds like
Reproductivity.
Every word's been made up, so you just made a new one.
So because like all the spirits lived with God beforehand, and like that's why Mormons have big families essentially, is it's like a unwritten doctrine, or maybe it was written at one point, like you should have as many kids as possible because number one, like you're building up God's church, essentially, one true church, because born under the covenant, you're bringing them, but you're also allowing God's spirit children to come to this earth to experience agency, to choose good from evil, and to experience mortality so that they can be blessed more when/if they make it back to God.
So here's my question: so every human started out in heaven with God, right? According
to
to
Mormonism.
According to
Yeah.
Mormonism, right? Were they angels, or how does that work?
Spirit children is the
Spirit
term they
children.
use. Spirit children. Of
So
God.
they come to Earth to be tested. Is that
So
what it
that's
is?
the only way that we could gain physical bodies, because we view God as having a physical body, not
Oh.
one that breaks down like ours.
Really?
But that he has a physical, tangible being. So like, and the explanation for that is, when Christ was resurrected, right? He came back in a physical form. People touched his hands. They felt the nail marks, the hole in his side, all that stuff. So that was kind of, I think, the basis for that doctrine is that the only way God's spirit children could gain physical bodies was to come to this earth to be tested, basically to see how you would act not in God's presence. Because if we stayed spirit children, it's like living under mom and dad's house, right? Like you're always going to act better when mom and dad are around.
Okay, so these spirit children, they're not. Are there angels in this?
I think you would view angels as more like spirits who have left. Like they say angels and like they use angels, but like I think doctrinally the only angels that appear would be like former prophets or apostles. Otherwise, you're still like a spirit until the resurrection. Basically, you're just a spirit.
Okay.
So you can feel, Mormons, like, I don't know if they necessarily teach it, but it's like, oh, you're going through a hard time. Like, maybe you'll feel your grandmother's presence it's like Moana, dude. She's going to show up and guide you through that tough time.
Interesting.
So kind of the reproductive stuff in the church, there's a lot of fucked up sex stuff in the church, not like weird cult sex stuff, but like most Mormon homes are weirdly closeted about sex, which is why Mormons have very high divorce rates, because sex isn't discussed and it's a big no-no. Like you don't touch, you sure as shit don't touch. There's no sex. Like you only should kiss, preferably not very much tongue until you're ready to get married.
But after you get
And
married,
then-
you can do whatever the
But
fuck
that's
you
the
want.
problem. Yeah. But like, how do you go 20 years of like, don't look at anything even remotely pornographic,
Yeah.
right? Like, don't wear bikinis and shit like that, to, hey, dude, like now do whatever you want. And the other problem you get is like, when you get sealed,
You'll see that in
times-
any really orthodox
Yes.
type religion.
Yes.
They'll teach the same thing, basically.
But you'll get, it's like when you're going to go get married in the temple, a lot of times you'll meet with like the temple president and he'll have like an interview, a discussion with you and your soon to be spouse. And dude, they can make comments that will affect your entire marriage. They'll be like, basically maybe they'll tell you no anal, or they'll tell you sometimes they'll tell you no oral, because that's not helping with reproductivity, right?
Gets the motor running though.
Yeah. But I mean, like, they'll make a comment like that will affect your, because like
Wow.
you shouldn't ever get divorced. Like, you should do anything it takes to stay together. So like,
Right.
that's what I'm saying. Like, this affects the rest of your life.
I didn't realize that there was a high divorce rate,
Yeah.
and I would have thought the exact opposite.
It's more like from like the 70s, 60s on that the divorce rate's gone really up, or maybe it's been more in the last 30 or 40 years, but it's insane now.
Wow.
Or they'll say, like, you know, you can't use any kind of restraints like handcuffs because that affects agency, your ability to choose, because now you're like chained up. I'm not saying like
so
weird bondage shit.
domination
But like
stuff
even
is not
using
gonna work.
handcuffs, they'll be like no handcuffs or anything like that because that affects agency. So like, and not all do that. So I never had
That's what I
that
said.
discussion.
To be fair, not
No.
everyone is doing that, but that just may be somebody.
But it's their weird preferences, but because they're in such a high calling in the church, like a stake president or a temple president, or like your dad told you that growing up, like he made some passing comment about it because of his own weird sexual preferences from his dad, or like sexual information or the way they process sex, that like now that affects forever. Like you're in the rest of your life.
That's
So like
interesting.
some Mormons will have sex, like they'll only do like missionary position, or like they'll keep their garments on during sex. Or
What?
like, yeah, dude. Or like they only have sex when they're trying to, like, when their wife's fertile.
Oh, no wonder they get divorced so much.
But that's what I mean is like you end up with weird sex stuff because the church is so narrow minded, or like they refuse to talk about it. It's like you end up with high divorce rates and weird stuff, or like husband. I had a buddy, dude. This girl he dated for a long time. So she had been married before, Mormon, whatever. And the sex life was just really struggling because her family was more open about it, and she had certain expectations. And he was like, only when you're fertile, and like only missionary position. Like, we can't do a doggy style because that's like degrading, or I need to see your face so you can tell me no if you want to say no, or whatever. Like weird stuff. So, you know, she's really struggling because this is like their marriage is what they've been looking forward to. And like she can't even enjoy sex because it's so weird. And so she like prints off like men's health articles about things to help him. And he's like, I'm not looking at that. That's pornography.
Wow.
And so it was only a matter of time till they split up, but like, you're not supposed to get divorced. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just you. And then Utah has like one of the highest pornographic viewerships. I don't know what the specific term is, but like the highest numbers of pornography looked at. And it's become such a problem within the church, like in Utah, but because of the church, essentially, like these subcultures, because like their sex life is unfulfilling. Usually it's men looking at porn, not women, but normally it's the husband. But because their sex life is unfulfilled, part of it's the female's programming, or whatever. But anyways,
Wow.
it's just pornography is a big no-no in the church too. Like they tell you it's like an addiction and all this stuff. And
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with that in some ways, right? Like,
In some ways.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah, but again, you'll find that in almost every religion. They'll
Yeah.
tell you the same thing.
yeah,
If they're very orthodox. Porno is a bad thing. Stay away from it. You know,
But
don't
it's-
bang before you get married. Don't go jerking off.
I think the pornography, I mean, especially in like the last 40 to 50 years, though, it's even cultural. Like it's the instant gratification.
Yeah, it's right. It's on your phone.
But it's
I mean,
the same with social
when
media.
I was
like
when
the
I was a
pings in
kid,
your brain, the dopamine, it's kind of the same. I
Yeah.
mean, you at least you got a sexual release out of it. But
yeah, it was
anything
a lot more
can become an
satisfying when I was a
addiction.
kid because you had to hunt for it. It wasn't out there. You had to actually
everybody's
search.
got an older brother or an uncle that you had to steal it from their house or something.
Oh
like
shit!
that.
I got my first Playboy. I stole it from a barber shop down the road.
There you go. But he was the coolest kid in his school for
Yeah.
at least a week.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least a week.
Yep.
So the church is kind of coming out and taking a harder stance against like surrogacy and things like that. And so I think that's the only medical side that the church is not as savvy with. And I see their reasoning from that spiritual standpoint, but it's another level of control, in my opinion. It's just exerting control over other people's lives.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting.
Do you think that the Mormon church is reforming in a lot of ways than it has, or maybe reforming is the
Trying to
wrong
modernize
no.
to
Modernize,
attract
yeah.
more people.
There's a saying in the church that like whatever is socially acceptable or popular will be allowed in the church in like 10 to 20 years. They're 10 to 20 years behind the times.
Sure.
Which was a big realization for me, because if we have a modern day prophet like he claims to be, we should be ahead of the times. So like you look at garments, for example, like I mentioned, they used to be like long underwear, right? With the butt flap and the whole thing. And it's like But if God knew that the styles were going to change, it would have been really revolutionary in the early mid 1800s for him to be like, hey, dude, like garments are going to be like these weird cap sleeve things and like mid thigh. And like, that's your underwear. And people are like, dude, you're nuts. And then 150 years later, it's like, holy shit, like this dude really was a prophet. Like he knew what was coming.
Where did the undergarment thing come from?
That's a good question, man.
Because I don't know of any other religion that has that.
I think it's an exercise in control, bro. If you can control, well, Catholicism with the robes and shit, right?
Yeah,
With
but
the
they're not
rosary,
making people.
with the rosary. Maybe you have Orthodox Jews with the, I'm going to say it wrong, the yarmulke or the whatever it is. I mean,
Yeah, but the head covering is a thing that's in the Bible. I don't know of anything about the special long underwear in the Bible.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I should go look at that. To me, it was just another level of control.
Yeah,
It's like
that makes sense.
It's an outward expression, but it's also like a hidden expression. But I think it's a subculture of suffering. Like, bro, I got to wear these freaking shitty ass, uncomfortable, hot, sweaty, additional layer of clothing.
What are they made out of?
Clothes.
Wool?
No, dude, they have like all sorts of materials now. I don't even cotton, poly blends, like.
Are they
cotton,
blessed
mesh.
by somebody to make them holy, or how does that
They're
work?
not
They just
kosher.
come from
they're not
China.
kosher. They're
Well,
not
because they
kosher.
have the holy symbols on them, and you have to have an Apple or an active temple recommend to buy them. So the church owns the clothing company that makes them.
Oh,
So like it's like top to bottom. It's kind of been under the church's control.
they're made in China.
I don't know. It could be. I never looked at the labels, bro. I just got to put them on.
Man, you should look
Keep
at the
my nipples
label.
covered.
Report back.
Keep my nipples covered. What was the question? Sorry, I got a little off topic.
No, I didn't. No, that was great. I tell you one thing that I've always kind of thought was neat, and maybe you can about the Mormon Church you can expand on is like the prepper kind of side.
Oh man, that's
That
I've
to
always
me-
liked that too.
Yeah,
Jehovah's Witnesses don't do that?
No, we don't do that.
Okay, so end times, right? Like wars and rumors of wars and destruction and pestilence and famine and natural disasters. Kind of like, when Christ was killed, all that was
Yeah.
dark for 3 days, allegedly, right? No
Right.
light, 3 days, 3 nights. So when Christ comes again, there's going to be like all the wars and destructions, like World War, whatever number we're on
Right.
at that point, right? Anything that the church can use is like, that's the end time. So every generation has basically been told, you're God's elect, you've been reserved for this day and age because most likely the second coming is going to happen in your lifetime. Like, so I was told that. Now I'm starting to have kids. And so, like, I imagine my buddies.
That's a
they're still
big part of
Mormon.
Jehovah's Witness stuff too.
Okay.
The end is right around the corner.
Yeah. So the prepper kind of goes along with that. So the church came out and was like, you need to have a year's supply of food and water. And like,
That's a reasonable requirement for anybody, though. I
it's
think.
pretty smart, dude.
Yeah.
And the churches use that. They'll use it anytime. It's like the wildfires in California and people needed food. And they're like, hey, man, like, God told us to do this. And now this is why. Like, we're God's chosen people. We get to help these people that are suffering now. And so you get validation for that. But it was something that the prophet said, a year's supply of food and also like savings. They kind of mention that too. And not everybody does it, but like a lot of Mormons.
That's just being a good frugal person.
Yeah. So a lot of Mormons will take it to another level. Like my dad, and it kind of instilled in me too, dude. Like I've got freaking more guns and ammo than I know what to do with. You know what I mean? Like I go shooting every day. I'd have no problem doing it. I've got a bunch of like the Mountain House dinners, the dehydrated foods, because to me that they're more expensive, but it's lightweight and they last a lot. And they take their
Chili
edible
Mac?
food. Yep. I got a
Chili
lot of
Mac is dope.
bro.
You ever had the Chili Mac? It's dope. It's well
like
worth it.
legitimately, dude. I'd go buy a Mountain House and eat that for dinner. That's
I've
good
done it
stuff,
many
bro.
times.
So we did that with my kids like 3 weeks ago. They
Yeah.
thought it was great. So I think the prepper side is it's a subculture off of that. It's like if you're really in the know and you're really, savvy, like you would have a lot of guns and ammo too. And you would, you know what I mean? So
That's so interesting.
yeah, it is because I think we probably are going to line up more so
Yeah.
on end times with what we were taught.
Yeah.
So, because my growing up, and the way it was taught was, well, you don't have to worry about that because if you're saved,
Yeah.
you'll ascend and you won't be there for all that.
Yeah.
So like my parents, as they've gotten older, that's kind of what they say. They're like, well, now all this food storage and this guns and stuff will be for you guys because, ideally we'll just die off because we'll be resurrected anyways. So you kind of get both sides of that. You get the, you're one of God's chosen, essentially, like you've done all the right things. You're temple worthy. You've fulfilled your callings. You're paying your tithing. Like, of course, you're going to go to heaven. But it's also like you're obeying the prophets / God's commandments by being prepared.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You said temple worthy. What? what is.
So we kind of mentioned the temples.
right.
So being temple worthy, they have like, so you get a temple recommend. I think they're for 2 or 3 years that they're valid. And then you have to like re-up. So you go in for a temple interview. You're going to have one with your bishop and then one with either the stake president or a member of the stake presidency. It has to be with, I think it's one of the presidency of the stake presidents, 3. So you get the president, the first counselor, second counselor. Bishops also have a first and second counselor. So you go in for your interview, and there's like the prep interview to make sure you're worthy to waste this other guy's time as well.
What makes you worthy?
So, you're paying your tithing. You're fulfilling your callings. The questions like, are you honest in your dealings with your fellow man? Are you a tithe payer? They actually ask you, do you affiliate with any groups with like contrary beliefs to the church, essentially? So like probably anarchy would be like a no-go, or like communism. The church was really hard against communism.
Good for them.
Ironically enough, or funny enough, God's chosen people were very anti-Martin Luther King and like the civil rights movement,
That's a
because that
shame.
was communism. It's a shame.
It's a shame.
A lot of racism embedded in LDS beliefs, because they believe that, the mark of Cain is African Americans.
Oh,
And then
that's
when
a shame.
Moses' son didn't turn away at his nakedness when Moses got shit-faced and passed out, because he didn't walk backwards to cover him up, he turned around and looked at his dad's nakedness, that he had the mark of Cain put on him. And so it was Ham, right? Ham? Moses' son?
I don't remember.
Biblical scholarship, whatever, not my strong suit. I think it was Ham. So like after all of the people got killed, Ham looked at his dad naked, and so now we have black people again on the earth. It's not my racist beliefs.
Would have been
but this
Moses,
is
though. It would have
embedded
been
in the church's beliefs.
not Moses. It would have been somebody else.
No, Moses' son. Oh, no.
No.
Noah. Noah's son. Thank you.
yeah.
See, biblical scholarship. I suck, bro. Noah.
Yeah.
Flood. Everybody dies except for Noah and his family.
That's right. And somehow they get every single animal or a couple.
Because we don't believe in evolution in Christianity.
Yeah,
Most
right. And it wasn't just 2,
Christians don't believe
because
that.
there's only 2 of the unclean animals. There's actually 7 of the clean animals.
We don't talk about that, dude.
Yeah.
That's not general Christian. It's just 2.
People don't know that.
It's children's stories. It's 2. God damn it.
No, it's not 2. It's only 2 of the unclean.
Why were the unclean allowed on the boat, bro?
That's a good question.
Like, God's got to save all the animals, but he's got room for unclean animals?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense, bro. That seemed
The
like a
ones
good
that are
time to
clean,
reset.
the ones that are clean, got to eat the unclean ones.
Oh,
Let's ask
that's
another
what
question.
it is.
God's all powerful. Why is he making unclean animals? Setting up for failure.
Those are devil
just like
animals.
Adam and Eve.
Those are the devil's animals.
So you
This
just
is the
kind of
spirit
that's
of
why the devil made
kind of-
the pig so tasty.
y'all are probably gonna way outscholar me on this one, but kind of the some of the stuff that I like to look at, like the unclean animals, when that stuff was first come around, like
It's law of Moses, right?
Yeah.
well, yeah, but I mean, as far as putting into practice, like if you look at some of the stuff now, like not to eat pigs, was it trichinosis that pigs carry,
they carry
not
it.
cooked to a certain, there's a lot of things that I look back at myself and go, that was the explanation for the time, right? We didn't have, we didn't know that pigs carried this or whatever. So like it
So that re-solidified your faith.
well, yeah, I mean,
In
but
a
not.
sense.
I think
in a
it's just an
sense,
unscientific way of
It's
doing
a
this. You'll get sick if you don't
Right.
if you eat this, or you'll get whatever. So it was like we don't know why it happens. It's an unclean animal. Just don't eat that fucking animal because you're gonna get sick.
Yeah, so kind of almost to the allegorical part of it is kind of what I'm.
Same thing. Like
I'm
the
just
reason
smiling because it's like, so because somebody's an idiot, we have to make it religious. So because Jimmy didn't know how to cook bacon and we all got sick, now God made this animal unclean. It's not because Jimmy sucked at cooking that pork steak. It's because God made unclean animals.
Here's
So
something-
It's just tying in religion with people's.
yes, but here's one.
But
thing.
also,
Hold
like,
on, hold
we
on,
didn't have
hold
a-
on.
we didn't
Hold
have-
on. One thing that
Sorry,
the Bible
David.
did get right, and I wish it was still a common practice. You guys would appreciate this more because I'm not married. But when the woman went on her cycle, that bitch had to segregate herself for 7 days. Right? Come on, that's a good deal.
It's in there. All I'm gonna say
Yeah,
is it's
that's
in
it.
there.
What I was saying is,
listen,
I was
your
thinking about-
PMS and go in your room and don't come out for 7 days.
back to the pork, because this guy, back to the pork, just in general, right? You didn't have a thermometer, right, at that time. You didn't have, there are things that people, that it, maybe saying it allegorically is the wrong way to say it, but if you understand what I'm saying, like these things that ended up being, kind of a net positive for how we did at the time, kind of makes sense to describe them in a religious way. As later on we realized, oh, well, we need to cook pork to 165 or whatever,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Kind of like butchering an animal the kosher way. It's that way you're not fucking it up and getting piss and bile all over the meat.
You're right.
Yeah, there's a right way to do it, and
No, you're good. Finish your thought.
oh, that's it. I got nothing else.
I Googled the temple recommend questions. I'm not going to read all of them, but just like a general thing. So, like, do you have a testimony of the restored gospel of, like, Jesus Christ, basically? So, like, do you believe in the church? Do you have a testimony of the church? Do you have a testimony of Jesus Christ? Do you have faith that God is the eternal Father? Do you obey the law of chastity? So that's no masturbation, no looking at porn. You're trying to keep your thoughts as pure as possible. Like, technically, you're not supposed to have impure thoughts about other people.
Right.
And they'll ask, but they ask high schoolers this, like violation of privacy. So you send your 12, 13, 14-year-old son or daughter in with this meeting with the bishop, right, who you trust. And if they're going through the repentance process, so if they fucked up in the law of chastity, like they had sex with their boyfriend, they go in and they have to divulge whatever details that the bishop
Oh
asked
yeah,
them.
we do this. The J-Dubs do the same thing.
What? So, like,
Yeah. If you're a kid and you fuck up, like it doesn't matter what you did. If you violated
Yeah, it
one
doesn't
of the
matter.
one of the rules, you have to go in before
Could
the
be the word of
elders
wisdom,
and say
could be alcohol,
and say,
whatever.
listen, I was dating this girl and I banged her and I feel bad about it and I want to. They'll be like, all right, well don't do that again. If
So-
it's a repeat offense, then they'll be like, hey, now we're gonna do something about
yeah.
it.
So your response, though, but we see this with Catholics all the time with confession.
Right.
At least it's supposed to be anonymous. Whereas this one, you get to look the bishop in the eye and he gets to ask you about your weird sex life.
It's all
or
about the
habits.
shame of it.
Yep.
Make you stop doing it again.
Shame's a big part, and the church would never
Yeah.
say that, but it is.
It's all about shame. Shame
Because
and
that
control.
would keep you from doing something bad if you knew you were going to have to look your bishop in the eye.
Yep.
So law of chastity, word of wisdom, right? So like Mormons don't drink alcohol. We're not supposed to drink coffee or tea, which there's like leeways. Like herbal teas are fine, but like black and green tea are not fine.
I was confused on that. I thought it was caffeine for a long time, and someone told me
No,
it's
so
not
that was a
caffeine.
subculture thing. So I think an apostle or a prophet made some comment about that at like a fireside. It wasn't like official church doctrine, but they made a comment. And so like the ultra faithful, like my wife's parents, they still won't drink caffeine. Like that's a big.
What's
no-no.
the deal with the coffee, tea, caffeine, owning Coca-Cola?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, right? With the church's stocks, like they invest in all these massive companies that are like against what they're teaching.
Yeah, and they don't pay taxes. I read an article the other
Yeah.
day where they're
Well, it's religious or tax exempt, but they're
yeah.
worth like
Well, no,
$150
no.
billion.
Their business holdings are taxable.
Finally.
They always have been.
Okay.
But they aren't paying the taxes on them. But
The
they're so
SEC
big
filing,
that
there was a big thing with that recently.
this is a big thing. Yeah.
But with the word of wisdom, so there was a movement at that point in time, and I can't remember what it was around Joseph Smith's time, but the hot drinks, it actually like specifically mentions hot soup as well. And Mormons eat a lot of soup. It also says you should eat red meat sparingly unless it's like the wintertime because you don't have crops in the wintertime, so you got to eat more meat.
Good for the heart.
But the church is like mass consumers of meat, bro. Like Mormons and pot roast. Like, holy shit, that's like a hand-in-hand thing. You know what I mean?
Doesn't
So
like a
it's
pot roast.
You get letter of the law and spirit of the law type of a situation there where some people are more diehard than others. So the caffeine and like the coffee, it kind of fell in this weird subcategory because it says hot drinks. And tobacco too.
Yeah, I did know the tobacco thing.
That makes sense, but I don't understand why can't you drink a hot drink?
They literally believed it was like bad for your stomach. Early 1800s understanding of science. Because it mentions hot soup too. So it was hot drinks and soup, but they like literally believed ingesting something too hot, like temperature wise, was bad for your intestines.
That's why Kellogg invented the cornflakes, because he believed that spicy foods and foods with
Yes.
flavor would make you horny. Want to go out there and fuck and jack off.
Okay.
So he's like, if you just ate bland foods,
Yeah.
then you're never going to get horny and
It's
want
like
to
a
go
Quaker
back.
thing. Like we
Yeah.
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 Some weird thing. Quaker's a brand.
But
Yes,
I love
mean it like
cornflakes.
that.
I like to dress them up. I put all kinds of shit on them.
Okay.
They're like rice for the
Like it
cereal.
can go either way. Like
Yeah, you put
Sweet or
fruit in
savory.
there. You throw
Yeah.
some sugar in. It's fucking fantastic. I love them.
it's like grits. Grits will go both ways.
Yeah.
man. They're like bisexual breakfast foods.
Yeah,
They go
it's
both
like
ways.
shrimp.
Can we say that?
Yeah. I mean, but that's a great
Bisexual breakfast foods.
Bris-
We need to get a shirt made of that. Bisexual breakfast foods.
yeah. Because I like grits with butter and salt and pepper, and I like grits with
Yeah. I love
little
grits.
jelly
See,
in there.
I don't like grits.
At all?
I'm a bad Southern man. But we're not in the South, so we're in Texas.
Listen,
in
really,
Texas.
calm down. Southern man don't need you around anyhow.
Listen, son, if you want to fight, I'll fight you.
Oh man.
Give me 3 steps. We'll just keep quoting. Give me 3 steps towards that door, buddy.
There's worse bands you could quote.
I'm just a simple man.
So here's
Yeah,
here's
Ted
my
will
question.
recommend interview questions
Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
make sure you're worthy. No, just kind of wrap that thought up. So you get re-interviewed. Make sure you're in good standing with the church. You're paying your tithing. You're obeying all the strict sub laws that make Mormonism weird or unique. Whatever you want to, God's chosen people are unique people.
I've learned a lot about Mormonism. A lot of things I didn't know.
So,
Interesting.
And you could ask like an active Mormon, and they'd probably just shit all over what I said, but I could back them into a corner with it. I stand behind anything I said here tonight. That's
awesome.
Yeah.
So how does salvation in like what happens when you die if you're a Mormon in good standing?
I was gonna, because I've heard some things.
Yeah,
I'm
so-
kind of curious.
You get to take over your own planet or something?
So you have the and that's actually, they changed that recently. They're
Really?
dialing that back. So that's a big thing that when I left the church that like really made me mad, because it's like God's supposed to be this, the church teaches God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And like the whole point of having a prophet is to lead us in these end times. And like, why have we had all of these changes if God's calling a prophet? Like we haven't even been back for like 200 years, the church, right?
Yeah.
But like we've made all these crazy changes since then, like in big doctrinal changes, including that. So like we believe that we could become gods. We have the opportunity.
Yes.
So the whole plan, right? They call it the plan of salvation. So we're spirit children before this life, come to this earth to gain bodies to be tested, right? To see if how we're gonna act when we're not like directly under God's thumb, and what we're gonna do under adversity and all that shit. So when you die, you either go to spirit paradise or spirit prison, based off of basically how you lived your life.
Okay.
And so the people in spirit paradise are going to teach the people in spirit prison. So they believe that everybody who's ever lived will have the opportunity to accept or reject God's restored gospel teaching. So basically Mormonism.
Okay.
So like me meeting you when I was still a member, and like me telling you about Mormonism, like you could argue that that was your chance to join Mormonism and you didn't, because you knew a Mormon and you didn't ask more questions, or that's on me for not being like a diehard, almost like a Jehovah's Witness, and like trying to shove it down your throat full time. That now I'm going to be punished in the next life for not sharing the gospel with JD when I could have saved him and his entire family. So basically in spirit paradise and prison, you have the opportunity to accept or reject the gospel if you didn't in the last life. And you're kind of just hanging out in that limbo until the second coming of Christ. And then there's going to be like the first and second resurrections, like the first resurrections for like the most elect, and then like the second resurrection. Everybody's going to get a physical perfected body at the resurrection, even the unworthy or unholy. The difference being that only the most elect will basically be able to reproduce. So like imagine, and they don't say this, but like really, you're like Barbie and Ken, like your ability to reproduce will not be there if you weren't the most chosen.
Okay.
So if you've done everything you were supposed to, and you were part of like the 0.01% of people who ever lived on this earth that were Mormon, and then like the very small percentage of that dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, you can become a god essentially. And
Are you like a sub god? You're still answerable to the other god? Okay.
And that's like, doctrinal shit. Like, so does that mean that our God also has
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
And that's like you don't ask about that. God is the most powerful. Like, but by Mormon teachings, like probably. So that's kind of a joke for people that leave the church, is like, did we get like some retard God, like some guy that was a Mormon on another planet, and he just kind of like did just enough, and that's why this world is so fucked up. Because like he doesn't really know what he was doing. Like he dotted enough I's and crossed enough T's. Like he kept the law of chastity just enough to become a god himself. And that's why this world's so fucked up, because he's like semi-retarded. We use the R word.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I don't give a fuck, dude. I'll use the R word. I grew up in the 90s, bro.
Yeah.
I got to spend all day with you freaking potatoes. I
Yeah.
can say the R word on this podcast.
I love that. Being called a potato and a retard.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Just like being back in high school, bro.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the way it should be, right?
the way
That's
it should
the way it should be.
Yeah, we don't
So-
censor ourselves here.
Yeah. Good.
Shouldn't anyway. Well, we do a little bit because we don't want to lose our jobs. But
So it's like Mormons believe that, like, yes, you can become a god, but from what I understand, they're starting to remove that, like, off of their website and, like, new publications that the church is putting out. I've heard that they're taking that stuff out.
oh, that's interesting.
It's
That'd
like
be
they're-
like the major selling point, though.
They're acknowledging it without talking about it.
So is there a heaven and hell in Mormonism?
So have you read the Book of Mormon? when you went on your
I read it. I can't.
intellectual, spiritual journey.
I agree with Mark Twain where he said it was like chloroform in print.
Well, yeah, very similar to that. So some prophets in there, and this is more of the standard church teachings, is that like hell isn't fire and brimstone. It's now like the veil has been removed from your mind, and you saw all of like your fuck ups, and you're unworthy to be in the presence of God. And so it's like that cyclical depression thinking where like now you have to spend eternity just thinking about how you shit the bed.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So not so much fire and brimstone with the demons whipping you on the back and you've got to get filleted alive over and over. It's more of a, I would say like
Purgatory?
a mental state.
Like somewhere in between, like a purgatory.
I don't know. It depends what you believe in purgatory. Some people would believe purgatory is hell. So
Yeah.
it's a mental hell. Though I would say the way the Mormons teach it. I mean, in other places it says, fire and brimstone and all that shit. But I think that the more official church teaching would be that knowledge and understanding that you're unworthy to return or to live in the presence of God.
Yeah, that would be pure hell.
So
You
like
couldn't do that.
Mormons
Listen to
believe
the
in
harps and shit.
4 heavens or hells basically. So like there's hell or outer darkness, and that's for like murderers and people that deny the faith. So me, I'm out there with murderers.
God damn.
But
I knew
like
you're a bad guy.
rapists and stuff like that, they're like in the lowest. It's like the telestial kingdom, is what they call it. And I think the telestial.
What is it called again?
Telestial.
Telestial.
Yeah, with an L. T-E-L. Telestial.
Okay.
Terrestrial is the middle. Okay.
Okay.
And
These
then-
are different types of heaven?
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah. And then celestial is basically where all the good members are going to go. And the celestial is divided up into like 3 sections. We don't know that much about the 3, but the highest kingdom is the only one. It's like for people that were married. Because like if you don't get married in this life, you don't make it to the highest.
Damn.
Interesting, right? So, and that's the only
Well,
place.
because
that,
you
like,
got to make
can-
spirit babies and when you go back, right?
So, but I mean, like if you were a good person and you go to the next life. So that's what they say is like, oh, it's like if JD was a good member his entire life. Like he just couldn't find that one person to marry. Like my dad's best friend all through high school. Like he just never got married. He got hit. My dad's like, 65. He's 65.
Yeah.
He died like 3 years ago. His best friend on a bike ride or something up the canyon in Utah. And like somebody hit him and like just kept going.
Damn.
Yeah. Anyway, so he never
Thanks,
got
God.
married. And so like the nice church doctrine is like, oh, well, he'll probably get to find some equivalent sweet lady that also never got married. And so he can still make it to the highest kingdom in the celestial kingdom, the top.
So you can get in that second level, you can get married and move up?
I don't. So that's kind of a mixed bag. It depends. So some prophets have been like, whatever you did in this life, like you can't get any higher than that shit. Like that's it. But then the nice teaching is like, oh, well, JD, he'll meet some nice lady in the next life and he can still get sealed. And she was just waiting for him. So it kind of depends what you believe.
Okay.
They haven't that's one of those questions. Like if the church is pressed, they'll be like, we'll find out in the next life. Just don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're supposed to do here. So they don't have an answer, bro. Because
Yeah.
either they're pissing some people off who like, man, I was stuck in this shitty fucking marriage my entire life so that I could make it to the highest degree in the next life. And friggin' JD's ass over here who never had to put up with a bitchy wife, he's going to get to where I get to go. You know what I mean? It's like either way, you're kind of pissing people off.
Wow.
So they don't like to piss people off. They want to keep it kosher. So, but that's how the Mormon heavens and hell work.
Interesting.
But you could argue that the terrestrial and telestial, because only the 3 degrees in the celestial kingdom are in God's presence, basically.
Yeah, so he just ripped fucking masonry right the fuck off, didn't he? Got the 3 degrees. That's interesting.
You guys said you didn't want to discuss masonry. But yeah, more similarities there. Like I said, bits and pieces pulled from everywhere, man. Joseph Smith was the great compiler. He's the remix master and a pedophile.
So do they have does the LDS church
I'm not going to take it back. I'm not going to take it
does
back.
the
Fuck that guy.
LDS does the LDS church teach have a teaching about like an Armageddon or anything like that?
Just more of the second coming stuff. I think it's in Doctrine and Covenants in the Book of Mormon about the second coming. The wars and rumors of wars and pestilence and plague and
It's a second coming, a
natural
cleansing of the
disasters.
earth and a reaping of the souls and all that
So
shit.
all of those things are signs of the second coming. So like you could argue that, the fires in Maui and, LA flooding
Yeah.
and whatever the hell else, Ukraine and all that shit going on. It's all indicators of the second coming.
Yeah.
But that shit's been going on since America existed.
Forever.
We're just
It's been-
fucking everything up.
It's been going on forever, ever. There's been famines and pestilence
Yeah.
and
But if you
wars
can
and rumors
attribute
of
it-
wars and all that shit.
You see it throughout the Bible too, though. I mean, especially in the Old Testament. Like anything we can attribute to God, we will.
Yeah.
Which like that pisses people off, but like if you take a step back and look at it analytically or logically, like it's all it is.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
interesting.
people view the comet as like, was it Jim Jones or who was? No, Jim Jones wasn't the comet. That
No,
the
it was
Kool-Aid.
Adventist.
That was
the
the-
Adventist was the comet coming in. No,
That's
they did have
Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate, but
Heaven's
also
Gate.
Adventist had. There's a story in the Seventh Day Adventist.
I don't know anything about them. I
Yeah,
never really
it kinda
studied them.
goes-
Which is weird. You think I would have studied the Adventists, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Because Russell was an Adventist. But I
But
never,
modern times is kind of the point. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at the Waco incident with what's his face,
Yeah,
David Koresh.
David Koresh.
They viewed
Actually,
that as the second
my
coming.
homie.
They viewed that as the second coming.
Actually, a branch of the Seventh Day Adventist.
Yeah.
Branch
Yeah.
Davidians, a branch off.
Yeah,
of the
the
Seventh Day
Adventists spawned a lot of cults for some reason. I'm
Yeah.
not really sure why. I should look into them some more.
So just looking at natural events and then attributing it to something religious.
But that's what people have been doing. That's where religion came from.
It's
It's a way to explain. It was ancient man's way of explaining natural phenomenon because they didn't have the scientific method. They didn't know
Sorry,
what caused the rain. They didn't know why the sun. They thought the sun was a god.
Yeah.
It came, and when it went down, it was doing battle, and you had to sacrifice so that it could be strong and come back. They didn't understand how the world worked, so they made up these stories about gods and all of his magic powers and all that other stupid shit.
I think it's possible to believe in science and be a good Christian. I'm not saying anything like that. The whole religious aspect of natural phenomenon being
Yeah.
explained through religion instead of having both of those equal parts in your life.
Yeah, and all the visions of God and stuff people had is really because they ate some mushrooms or something else that got them a little loopy, and they saw visions of God.
And that was a big thing too, like even in the LDS faith. So like when Joseph Smith was convincing these young women to marry him, or other women, not all of them were underage, some were older. He'd be like, God came to me and told me you need to marry me. And they're like, yeah, God's not telling me that. And he'll be like, okay. So I think there were 2 women, maybe 3, where he came back and he was like, an angel appeared to me with a flaming sword and said he was going to kill me if you didn't marry me.
Damn.
Like God couldn't appear with a flaming sword for anything else. He had to appear, and he couldn't
gotta
appear to
bust
the
that ass right
woman,
there.
to the woman to say, bro, like if you don't marry Joseph Smith, I'm going to kill you. He's like, no, like this dude's coming to me telling me that God told him he was going to kill him, the prophet of the church, if you didn't marry him.
Damn. That's a guilt trip to lay on
And so
somebody.
some women, they'd be like, well, you need to fast and pray about it. And so they would like not eat or drink for 2-3 days. And then they'd finally feel good about it. And it's like, are you having a religious, I'm doing quotations here, religious experience because God told you, or because you're deprived of food or water and your hormones are all fucked up and you're finally like psychologically convincing yourself, or your body's just shutting down and you're convinced this is a spiritual experience?
Yeah.
Like the Indians, they'd take drugs and go out, or they would just go out in the freaking woods.
Yeah, they'd
for
starve
3 or
themselves
4
until
days until they had a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, dude. Like you can't, and I theologically, whatever, like you can't tell me that that's God, like that I have to fast for 3 days to feel God's spirit. And it's like, bro, I'm just haven't eaten for 3 days. Like, of course I'm going to feel some funky shit.
My blood sugar's all fucked off.
So it's like Mormons, they fast one Sunday a month and they go up and they bear their testimonies, right? It's like they call it fast and testimony meeting. So you start fasting, I think it's like right after dinner or something like that, or some people don't eat dinner the day before. And then they don't eat breakfast and they don't eat lunch or whatever. So they go to the fast and testimony meeting, and the congregation, anybody in the congregation that feels the spirit can get up and bear their testimony.
What does that mean?
So you get up there, and like a testimony would be stating what you believe and why you believe it to be true. But what you get is, we call them like storymonies, where they just get up there and they just tell some off the wall story, and then they start crying and just say, I believe in God and the church. But like what it's supposed to be is, you get up there and maybe you will have an instance that happened that week or that month where like, you felt God's spirit or God's hand in your life, and that's how you know that the church is true.
Oh, okay. I got what you're saying now.
But it's a psychological thing as well, where your peers are all believing something, so it's psychologically like you're being convinced. It's cult beliefs.
Yeah.
There's books on it.
It's interesting.
Entire books. I don't say that jokingly. Like there are literal books in psychology on how these things happen and why people join cults. But also, you convince yourself that you're feeling the spirit because, number one, every time you bear your testimony, a lot of people are going to come up to you after that meeting and tell you like, oh, good job. I really, felt the spirit. I loved your testimony. I appreciated your story. So you're getting all of that positive feedback, and you see that from as far back as you can remember if you've been brought up in the church. So you're psychologically programmed to expect that result. It's the same thing of like, if you see a PG-13 or an R-rated movie, you're not going to be able to feel the spirit. You're going to feel icky. So then when you go see one of those with your buddy when you're 11 years old and you feel like shit and you feel guilty, it's because you've been psychologically programmed that you were going to feel guilty from as far back as you can remember. It's psychology. So with fast and testimony meeting, like you get those quote unquote spiritual experiences because you're in that fasted state, because you're dehydrated and you're hungry. And, you know, modern times we're not used to feeling like that because modern conveniences and all that. So you get these spiritual experiences that then you rely on when things get hard in your life. Well, like I can't leave the church because I felt the spirit all of these times.
Yeah.
And really it's just psychological programming.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting.
I learned a lot.
I have too.
I apologize, man. Like you asked a question, but it's like I have to answer it.
No, it's
roundly,
fantastic.
So I apologize.
No, don't apologize.
It's
That's
I thought witnesses and Mormons would have a lot more in common, but we really don't.
like some things surprised me. I didn't know Jehovah's Witnesses kept records, which we didn't really talk about here, but you mentioned that in our
Yeah.
previous
Yeah,
discussion because Mormons are big. They literally have vaults in the mountain outside of Salt Lake. It's like the mountains are made of granite.
Well,
And they have
Ancestry.com is
granite vaults.
Mormon run.
Is it really?
Yeah.
No-ish. So
Ish?
Mormons, if you have an active like temple recommender, you're a member, you can get a free ancestry.com. Like you don't have to pay the $100. You get free because the church has done so much to help them out. Like they've shared records with them because the church documents everything. And they've also done so much genealogy within the church that it's kind of a quid pro quo. Unless they might own enough stock that they do. But originally it was just they helped share their information.
Okay. Well, that's
With them.
cool.
So,
Interesting.
and that's also something, that's what the whole purpose of the temple is too. So like you take out your own endowments, like you do your work for yourself so that you can return to God, but you do it for anybody that's ever lived. So like the church is big on genealogy because it's your job as a current member to make sure all of your ancestors have been saved because they didn't have the opportunity to hear the gospel. And they're waiting in the spirit world, which we discussed, for you to do their temple work so that they can cross over into paradise. From
Is that where the whole baptizing the dead comes from?
Yes.
I've heard that.
Okay.
I've heard several times people talk about, you know, if my grandmother knew that was, you know, she'd be rolling over if in her grave.
And so, and that's the thing. It's kind of a tricky. So we're trying to get baptized for everybody ever who's ever lived. And then, but they still have to accept the gospel. It's like, we're just covering their bases. So if they accept the gospel in the spirit world, that they're okay. And same with the endowment, but the endowment's like an hour and 40-minute session. The baptism, man, is just slam dunk over and over and over and over. But the endowment session where you're going through like the Adam and Eve and making the covenants, and it's the Masonic ritual, which I don't know if it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours for y'all or whatever. You can even say that much, but it takes a lot longer. So like imagine baptism is fast for all those names, but the endowment session is like 2 hours for every person that's ever lived ever. So
Very interesting.
Yeah. My takeaway is Jehovah's Witness and Mormons are way more organized than the churches that I grew up in.
God's house is a house of order, bro.
Hey,
Because ours basically were, most of the time, churches I went to were just that church.
every year the witnesses put out a report that tells you, it breaks it down to like the country, every country in the world where they're active, the number of peak publishers, how many hours total everybody put out in service, knocking on doors,
Cool.
how much
Seems to
money
level
they
up every
spent.
year.
Like, yeah, so like I pulled it up earlier, but it says the number of branches of Jehovah's Witnesses is 86. Number of lands reporting 239. Total congregations 117,960. And then it like goes down like peak publishers and how much they spent supporting people. Let's see, where was it at? During the 2022 service year, Jehovah's Witnesses spent $242 million caring for special pioneers, missionaries, and circuit overseers in their field service assignments.
So it's interesting. Like the Mormons, they were kind of getting some shit for because they have all those investment funds. Like that was a big thing this year with the SEC filing. They got in trouble and they got a light slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
And a lot of Mormons covering for them.
It could have been
and
way
making
worse.
Excuses. It should have been.
Yeah.
It
It might not have been
rumor
the
is that
taxes. It might have been the
IRS
reporting to
Yeah.
the SEC is what it was. Yeah.
that the IRS is going to hit them for some tax stuff. So the
For
SEC
sure.
wasn't hard, so that the IRS could be. I'm still like fingers crossed that's going to happen. So the church was getting some guff a couple of years ago about like, hey man, you guys have like, literally billions of dollars, and you're not doing really shit to help other people like you say you are. And so the church finally came out and they're like, oh, this year we did like $200 million in aid.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, that sounds really cool. And then it's like, you see what the church is worth in their portfolio, and it was like 0.0 something % of that. And it's like, that's like worse, dude. It's like if I make $100 and I'm like, I gave 2 cents to charity this year. And it's like, kind of a piece of shit, dude.
Yeah.
So members will be like, dude, our church gave over $200 million. It's like, how much did they bring in? How much did they bring in?
See, I would like to know that about the witnesses, because I don't know. Nobody's ever come out and said anything if they have any business dealings, because they claim that all their money goes to printing books and magazines and supporting the ministry. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I've never seen anybody look into that and see if that's true or not.
So the church with their spending and stuff, like they did when the SEC crap all came out and they kind of really exposed what the church was worth, that the church doesn't need another dime of tithing from its members. It has so much in its portfolio that it would still make money every year off of the returns. Mm-hmm. Like with their current spending, their returns is more than their annual spending, and they're still bringing in so much money in tithing every year on top of that. So their portfolio continues to grow, and they're not even spending like the interest per year. Like it's just wild. Which is another big thing for me too, that like just another nail in the coffin, man, and me leaving. It's just like they're so like death by 1,000 cuts. Like I can one-off blow things off, but it's like, man, you start looking at things back to back to back, and it's just like death by 1,000,000 cuts.
Wow. Well, I think we should call it quits.
Yeah,
this has
it's
been
been a
good.
long
We've been doing this for 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
Oh, we should have done this in 2 parts.
we should have. We can
There's
always
so
do another
much.
one.
Let's
We can always
do
do
it.
another one. We should.
Yeah.
We'll do
Yeah.
another one. Good stuff. All right, guys. Thanks
All
for
right.
listening.
Thanks. Appreciate
Next
it.
time.